All right, so I got 1900 or 7 p.m. So let's get started. CNET good? Staff? Council, we're all set up? All right, so if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, I guess as I forgot, I'll officially call it to order. Okay. So I'll just make an announcement. So as the published agenda, we're going to move NB1 to a later date. So we will not address that tonight. That's the workforce housing ordinance, because we feel like we have a pretty full agenda for the night. All right, so public open discussion. We limit anyone in the public. We have anybody online or in person, and this is for items that are not on the agenda for tonight. So we would ask that you either raise your hand online or come up to the lectern here and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Do we have anyone?
No one's online.
Anyone in the audience? Okay, we'll move on then to our special presentation. Oh, new agenda item, sorry. Does any members of council like to add an agenda item for this evening? I mean, there's an open slot, I just took one away. Okay, all right, we'll move on to special presentation. That would be Ms. Lori Cole, right? Okay, thank you. State College Area Connector Project Update.
Thank you very much. As you stated, my name is Lori Cole. I represent JMT, and I'm here tonight on behalf of PennDOT to present to you an update on the State College Area Connector. With me this evening is Eric Berniak, who is the Deputy Project Manager on the Pell Study from PennDOT, and he will be transitioning into the Project Manager upon Dean Ball's retirement. And also I have with me Kevin James from Michael Baker International, who is supporting the management side for PennDOT. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. So tonight I want to give you basically 3 agenda items that we have. Give you an update on the actual planning and environmental linkage report and where we stand with that. Talk about the recommended alternatives that we are intending to take into the National Environmental Policy Act process. We will then talk about what that means, what is the NEPA process as we call it, and the next steps. So as you know, PennDOT published the Pell study back in February, and we requested public comment and public input on the Pell study and the results. What we got during that, basically roughly a 30-day comment period, as you see, was 46 different comment letters and or emails. Go ahead, Jen. To summarize kind of what the topics of most of those comments kind of covered, is a list here. So many people provided a preference on their alternative, which is very natural. A lot of people provided comments on the PA 45 connector. And to refresh your memory, that was a connection from the proposed US 322 corridors up to PA 45. So it provided a local road connection directly to the interchange. And then a lot of people were very concerned about the various resources in the study area. Specifically here, agriculture, wetlands and waters of the US, sinkholes and overall geology of the area, threatened and endangered species and species in general, community or the people living in the area and the right-of-way acquisition, historic resources, air quality, greenhouse gases, and then noise. And then a lot of people were also starting to think ahead into the next steps and wanted us to think about these things as we move forward. Mitigation for the resources we just discussed, multimodal connections within a build alternative. And what that means is not only just having a highway project, but how can we connect pedestrians, bicycles, those types of things. And then continuing the level of community engagement that PennDOT had set during the Pell process. And then also considering stormwater, making sure stormwater was accounted for in any future design project. The Pell study ended with the recommendation of three alternatives to move in, or three build alternatives, corridors to move into the NEPA process. And it's kind of hard to see at this scale, but the very first one is what we call US 322 1OEX. And basically what that is to the right of the picture is where Potter's Mills Gap currently comes in. That facility would then parallel for about 2 miles on top of existing US 322, diverge north, have an interchange, and then come back down to US 322, again, paralleling into and connecting to the existing Mountain Inn Expressway. The next one is US 322 1 South. And that one, again, starting at Potter's Mills Gap, almost goes immediately south of US 322, paralleling for a while and then crossing back north, similar to the last one with an interchange. And then again, coming into US 322, heading into Boalsburg on existing alignment. And the last one is what we call US 322 5. Again, very similar to US 322 1S. It starts at Potter's Mills Gap, goes almost immediately south of 322. However, it stays south of 322 with an interchange. And then again, it comes back into an on existing alignment into Boalsburg. So those are the ones that we're going to take into, as I said, the NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. We're looking to prepare an environmental impact statement, or an EIS, as we call it. And during this time, we will do detailed engineering. We're going to do detailed field studies and come up with a recommendation for one alternative. We're going to do that in a 10-step process. First process is initiate field studies. This includes traffic, environmental, and engineering. So currently we're doing some additional traffic counts. We're out in the field doing wetland studies, farmland studies, threatened and endangered. We're doing all of that work as we speak. Once we get far enough ahead on understanding where the resources lie, our engineers are going to work with us and we're going to shift those corridors and create actual alignments. The second step is during the Pell we had a purpose and need. We're going to refine that for the smaller study area. Then we're going to publish what they call a notice of intent to prepare an EIS. That's the legal documentation that starts officially the NEPA process. During that time, after that, step 4, we figure we're going to have to continue to do some more investigation and engineering, come up with conceptual mitigation, and eventually, once we have that all done, we'll be able to identify a recommended preferred alternative. Once we have that recommended preferred alternative, we will actually prepare the document for public review, circulate that draft environmental impact statement. We'll hold a public hearing. Then once we have the public hearing, we address the feedback, we make changes that we need to do. We'll create the final EIS, and then we're going to do it combined with a ROD, which is a record of decision. And that means that's Federal Highway's approval to move forward. And that will also be circulated for public review. So that's kind of the process that we're going to be following. Now, I'm sorry. So what's that going to take? And I know this one's really hard for everybody to see, but this is kind of the timeline of our investigations. So most of our field work will be done during the 22-23 time period. I'm sorry, 23-24 time period. Our EIS, we're looking to have out probably in, the way it's shown here, I believe, is late 2024, early 2025. That's when we'll have a preferred alternative that we can officially tell everyone. And then the process continues out, and we anticipate the whole project, the environmental phase portion of the project, to be done in early 2026. The little green dots below kind of show you where we anticipate specific public meetings. The first one is looking to be spring of next year. That's when people would see the refined alignments and the corridors, taking from corridors to alignments. The next one is early 2025. That one's kind of a conservative estimate because it all depends on how many comments we get and any changes that we have to do after the spring one. It could shift into late 2024. That's when everybody would officially see what the recommended preferred is. And then the last green dot is the hearing that I had mentioned after the draft is published and circulated. And I think that's the last one.
It
so-
didn't go, yeah, it didn't go anywhere.
I was going to say, I think that's the last one I have, so I'm happy to take any comments, or Eric and Kevin can also help if there's any questions.
All right, great. All right, thanks, Ms. Cole. We'll start out with our expert here, Mr. Bernier. Questions?
Lori knows I've seen this before.
Time or two.
Maybe just clarification for others here. The status of the current Pell,
Sure. I'm glad you asked that. I skipped over that part. So the current Pell, I said there was a draft in February. It has been revised, it has been updated, it is on the website, and FHWA has accepted it. So we are completed with the Pell process.
okay, so it's final.
It's final, and it can be found on our current study website.
Okay. I don't have any questions. That was just for the
Thank you for
benefit of
asking that
everybody else.
clarification.
But I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to PennDOT and Michael Baker, particularly to PennDOT, for undertaking this exercise. I think for the benefit of those who are not aware, is this the first or second Pell exercise that PennDOT's undertaken?
This is the second Pell study that has been done in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Which is a extraordinarily intense outreach effort,
Yes, it has.
deliberate outreach effort that I've never seen ever before for projects like this. So in fact, my recollection is public really doesn't get much input until we start getting into these stages.
Correct. Normally that is the case.
The public has been fully engaged to an intense degree for the past 2 years just to get this far. So kudos to the process. Regardless of where you fall on one of those routes, you certainly can't deny the fact that people haven't had a chance to provide input.
Thank you.
Okay. Pell stands for what, just to,
Planning and environmental linkage.
okay, thanks. Yeah, wanted to clarify that. Susan, any questions or comments?
I have no comments, other than to say thank you. I appreciate the presentation. It helped me understand the process in a much better way, and that will be helpful when I'm talking with people about what's happening. So thank you very much. It was well done.
Okay, Anthony?
No questions. Thank you for the presentation.
All right, staff, manager, and other staff. All right, excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving right along, we'll go to reports. So manager's update.
Okay. There's really only one item to update council on, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Don Franson, the College Township engineer, to provide that update.
Our traffic calming project on Oak Ridge and Shamrock was completed today. There were 2 more crossings that needed painted. And Tuesday, I guess, is the first day of school, so we have everything ready to go for the first day.
With the exception of S's on the 4 signs.
Yeah, it says speed hump. It should say speed humps. Contractor is aware of the error, and he has some electrical tape that he says he can make it look just like his.
All right,
No, I'm lying about the electrical tape.
I was hoping that was a
Kidding.
But I have nothing else to report to council, but I did want to thank Dawn and the balance of staff, and our contractor, I think, did a really nice job with the project on both Oak Ridge and Shamrock.
Yeah, they move very fast.
Yeah. Questions for the manager? Anthony? Comments?
No, thanks.
Susan?
So project completed on time and within budget.
That is correct.
You
Yeah.
forgot that part.
Yeah. Highlight that. It was, it was crazy. I went on vacation and came back and like it's done. I'm like, wow.
Well, we had some
Vacation
intense
we're off.
debate over the budget a few months ago, so I think that's a good point to make.
It's within a budget.
With a budget, right, yeah.
So maybe you need to go way more often?
Oh,
Yeah. It's great. I drove it the other day.
I'm good.
Definitely slowed me down.
That's good.
it's effective.
That's effective.
All right, moving on. All right, I digress. COG Regional County Liaison Reports. We had a few. We had some submitted reports. So Rich is not here. He did submit a finance report. So that'll be part of the record. Susan, you had 2 meetings, public safety, IDA. Any comments to add to those reports?
The only comment I have, no, you have the report on the CTIDA. I did want to mention that, the fire safety group is working with Penn State Works Consulting, and they're going to be developing a formal job description for volunteer firefighter positions. So this sounds like the first of a project like this, and so by creating that job description, they hope they'll be able to better define what's expected of a volunteer. And they're also willing to share what they find out working with this consulting group from Penn State, with other volunteer fire companies to help improve recruitment and retention. And the other piece of news, the rest of it is all in the memo, but Sean Kaufman was appointed to be fire director. So, after a long search, and that was announced right at the meeting, so.
Okay. Anthony, you had a few.
Climate action on sustainability, we met on Tuesday the 15th, and just key points to bring up. They're working on, I'll say, the trash removal contract for the center region. We're working with a consultant on that. One of the big things that was up for discussion was the differences or benefits of an RFP versus an RFB. That would be a request for proposal and a request for bid. The other thing that's key to note that's going to be in these contracts, and it's currently in the existing contract, is require CNG on all center region routes. So they're already doing that now, and they want that to continue. And the reason why I point that out is the consultant advised that that would limit bids coming to us from other trash removal companies, but it's something that we wanted to keep in there. And lastly, if we're able, Pam Adams asked if we can link on our website, centersustain.com, so they have more visibility. And I don't know if you want a consensus from council on that. I see no issue with it. I think it's pretty good if there's a place that we can put it on our website.
Yeah, I
Anybody
think
have
we'll
any-
be able to accommodate.
Yeah,
Any big gripes or issues about that? No? No.
That's it.
Okay. Questions for Anthony or Susan? Comments? Eric, did you have any?
No, I got my 2 in before our last meeting.
All right, good.
I had a question for Susan, though.
Okay.
6 new volunteers starting. Is that something to be excited about, or is that just skimming the surface?
I don't think that's quite enough yet. So I think that's a part of the driver for doing this analysis and getting those job descriptions in.
Yeah. I
And
mean, it's
and
better
the
than-
other piece is they're having a hard time bringing the volunteers or retaining them because they're also hiring them into paid positions after they've been volunteering with them. So,
Okay, well, it's better than 0, I guess. I mean, it's a start.
and the school year is just starting, so there are quite a few volunteer firefighters that might come in from the school.
Okay, that was it.
Okay. I just had one question that I did not, submit a report for the rest of the council, just to try to get a consensus. The Spring Creek Watershed Commission has approved a budget and is looking to present that to each municipality that's a member. And basically my question is, the commission can come and present that, or we can just have it as an agenda item and review it in the consent agenda, essentially. So just as a consideration, no answer needed, but, just think about that. So just off the top of my head, I forgot about that, to include that in an email. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to DE staff. Any other reports to give at this point? And then we have PC. Yes, Mr. Hoffman. And so I would just ask you, you have anything to discuss on OB2, just wait till that time then, Bob, for the Shiloh Road.
Well, then, you have my report. We did look at Medler Field, and we approved it. Really no comments. The only one, the Summit Park subdivision, we approved to go to council with a footnote about a item to be put on the plans that integrates integration between the developer, PennDOT, PUC, and the railroad company. So that will be put on the plans. We felt there was a great presentation made by the railroad representative, and we all agreed that we should make some adjustments for maintenance and ownership and liability. So that's really it.
All right.
Until the
Yeah,
big one, right?
yeah, the big one.
Okay.
That was probably most of what you wanted to talk about.
Oh, heaven, yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. All right. Any questions for Planning Commission at this time? Comments? Okay. We'll move on then. DEIB, anything for DEIB? Council, staff?
Yeah, nothing from staff.
Okay. All right, moving on then. Consent agenda. So this evening's consent agenda consists of CA1, which is the minutes and approval of the August 3rd, 2023 regular meeting. CA2, correspondence. CA2A is a letter from Lynn and Cynthia Corman received August 4th regarding proposed changes to the Center Region Rental Code. CA2B is an email from Daniel Materna received August 7th regarding the casino. CA2C is an email from Daniel Materna received August 10th, 2023 regarding the casino. CA3 is an action item in approval of the following: Resolution R-23-22, which is September 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and September 10th, 2023 as Suicide Prevention and Awareness Day. CA3B is Project 23-11 Pedestrian Bridge, no bids received. And CA3C is remove Mr. Alston Shields as an appointed member of the CTIDA effective 8/17/2023, which is today. Do any members of council wish to pull any of those items? Eric? Susan? Anthony?
None.
Okay. Okay, and that, we're not gonna pull any, but usually we do read the resolutions, right? Yeah.
Not necessary.
Is there anything on B, that the one where there wasn't a?
Is there anyone here for
On
the
the bid,
resolution?
Don, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, after the time expired for bids, I did talk to one of the plan holders, and they said they were just swamped on a really big project, putting it out to bid, or getting a bid out for it, and they did not have time to look at it. They said if it would be rebid, they would be definitely submitting a bid, so it is out again.
Okay.
To be opened the week before the September 1st meeting, and hopefully an award for the September 1st meeting.
Okay. Thanks for that update. I guess my question is anyone here for the resolution and wishes to be read or photo op or anything?
It looks like there's a note from January asking us to email it or mail it
Okay.
to them.
Okay.
I can read it into the record if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If you're offering.
Sure. College Township, Center County, Pennsylvania, Resolution R-2322, a resolution of College Township designating the month of September 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and designating September 10th, 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Day in College Township. Whereas suicide is the leading cause of all deaths in the United States, and whereas the state of Pennsylvania, one person dies by suicide every 4 hours, making it the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14 and 25 to 34, and the third leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24. And whereas nearly 5 million people in the United States have lost a loved one to suicide, and whereas each member of our community is valued and irreplaceable, and whereas talking openly about stress and psychological health builds trust, reduces barriers to care, and enables early intervention, and whereas local and statewide suicide prevention efforts should be developed and encouraged to the maximum extent possible, and whereas most suicides are preventable by learning the signs and symptoms and limiting access to means, we can work together to help prevent suicide. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the College Township Council hereby designates the month of September 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and September 10th, 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Day in College Township. This resolution duly approved and resolved the 17th day of August 2023 by the College Township Council, Center County, Pennsylvania.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we have the consent agenda with no items asking to be pulled. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the consent agenda is approved. All right, our next item of business is full business number 1, and this is the center soccer and Celtic soccer discussion on equitable field use, correct?
That's correct.
Adam, you would like to lead this one out?
Sure. There was an agenda memo included in your packet this evening. I'll be referring to that throughout. Back in May of this year, we had received correspondence from the Celtic Soccer Association related to utilization of Fogelman Field. And as we know, Center Soccer Association participated in the development of the Fogelman Field complex along with College Township, State College Area School District, as well as the Department of Natural Resources, Pennsylvania DCNR, in order to accomplish that bill. And essentially, the issue came to light through the correspondence that there were difficulties in equitable field use relative to use by Center Soccer versus use by other organizations. And so as a result of the conversation that commenced, council had directed staff to go back, do some investigation, see where we may have some areas of commonality, be able to advance this issue, bring it back to council to try to resolve some of those issues. The initial approach that I was trying to take was to do the research that we had available to us in terms of our own internal records, first off, but also then to speak with both the Center Soccer Association representatives as well as the Celtic Association representatives. And I did so in participation with Jeff Hall, who's joined us here from Center Region Parks and Rec. And so we had completed those sessions, those conversations back in June. And this has been delayed up to this point in getting on the agenda simply because of scheduling. We had our charrette and DPZ matters in the balance of June, but also then just trying to accommodate various vacation schedules to ensure that we had most of council available here to help deal with the situation. And essentially what I was aiming to do, at least initially, was talk amongst the two groups, see if there were some areas where we might be able to reach some compromise or resolution. And at that point, perhaps bring in 2 members of council to sit down with the balance of that group collectively and make some firm recommendations back to College Township Council. After completing the conversations, it became pretty apparent to me that we didn't exactly have a lot of areas of potential compromise at hand. And so rather than ask a couple of members of council to participate, I went ahead and put together this memo, which I think fairly represents the facts that are known, and just simply brought it back to council. I think the upshot of all of this is that there really is no blatantly obvious solution to the situation that we have here in terms specifically of equitable field use. As I stated in the memo, at the time that the facility was developed in 2003, Center Soccer was the only soccer association, the only soccer organization that was active in the center region. And as a result, they had full and free use of scheduling throughout the utilization of the fields. And that really just hasn't changed over the preceding 20 years. So that's kind of where we're at. There is a June 2003 letter that I had actually drafted. I've been around too long. That basically went to, at the time, Mr. Martin Bradley, who was the president of the Center Soccer Association, recognizing the $150,000 contribution that Center Soccer made toward the development of the fields, and authorizing they to be able to provide signage and recognition of donors, things like that, but also, and most specifically, College Township expressed what its intentions were for the field and for field use. And to quote, it says, "It's the expressed intention of College Township Council that in recognition of CSA's financial contribution to the project, that CSA be granted priority consideration in the scheduling and use of the Hauserville Park fields. Center Region Parks and Rec shall administer this scheduling and use in accordance with all relative agreements involving the State College Area School District." Specifically, the relevant agreements with the State College Area School District were that if at any point in time the State College Area School District needed to use the field for one of their teams, that the field would be made available for that use. And that actually did occur during, I think it was the sinkhole issue at Memorial Field. There were, I think, a full year that field was basically utilized by the State College Area School District. So just to clarify what those agreements were with the school district, that was essentially the extent of the agreement with the school district. So I know we have representatives here. Well, let me finish off the memo first. So I've gone through, tried to make a few clarifying points about kind of how we got here based on the conversations that Jeff and I had with the two parties. There were some facts in there that I think kind of came out or rose to the surface. I made a few observations here. One of the things that I think is very problematic in terms of ensuring more equitable use of the Vogelman Field facility is the fact that the goals, the appurtenances that are associated with the soccer game, none of those are owned by Center Region Parks and Rec. They're actually, in this particular case at Vogelman Field, they're owned by Center Soccer Association. So, and Center Soccer takes care of their property, and when they're done using them, those nets and goals are actually bundled and stored and locked, and they're kept on the fields. So without having those appurtenances, goals and nets, etc., available kind of to the general public, it really somewhat limits the ability to utilize some of the field in the manner in which the field was originally designed and intended as a soccer facility. It's a rectangular field, and I know that lacrosse plays on it occasionally, and there are other different events and tournaments of various types that are held there on occasion. But the reality is that the absence of an availability of goals to the general public make this a particularly tricky situation. In light of all of that, I made a couple of recommendations to council, and I want to stress that these are not hard recommendations. They are recommendations that I've come up with on my own that I think will at least start a conversation with council or for council, at least as a starting point, relative to the use of the field and ownership of the goals. And specifically, what I had recommended is rather than in effect exclusive use of the field 6 out of 6 days that the field is available during the course of a week in season, use by Center Soccer Association, that Center Soccer be allocated 4 days and 2 days be available to either Celtic or Celtic soccer or other programs. And the other recommendation that I made was that Center Region Parks and Rec should either acquire, I think I said specifically, acquire the CSA apparatus, or really acquire goals and have them in place at Fogelman Field. So those were the two recommendations that I had made. But again, please view those only as a starting point for the conversation, because there's no particular magic associated with the recommendations, other than to provide a means for a degree of equitable use of the facility. And Mr. Chair, that's the presentation of my memo.
Thanks, Adam. All right, so we have members from CRPR here. We also have CSA. Do we have Celtic? Okay, so we have all parties present, and everybody will get their chance to speak. Before we move on, and I would just ask CRPR, I think at this point, to be ready to come to the lectern if you need to. I'm going to come back to council and say, you have any questions to what Adam has presented before others present? Okay? Yeah, go ahead. Two.
Yeah. Just clarifying questions. First, the Fogelman is open all day long, right?
Yes,
It's not just a soccer field, it's a park, right?
that's correct.
So, because I know when I lived close by, we'd go there and walk around, you can play frisbee, you can do all kinds of stuff all day long, right? So
That is correct.
you could conceivably play soccer in the middle of the day there, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Second question, both entities that we're talking about do own their own equipment at the parks they use, right? So what the arrangement with, or the situation with Center Soccer isn't any different than it is with the other organization as far as the equipment at the field goes.
That would be my understanding. I may need to get a clarification, but I think it's the same.
I'm referring to your memo, I just want to make sure I
Understood.
understand that correctly. And we can get back to that.
We could probably clarify with CRPR now, does CRPR own any equipment? Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
And then finally, I was here and I remember the remand or what we had asked, and I don't necessarily remember a huge focus on equitable field use as much as I remember a discussion asking staff to make sure there was a difference between exclusive and priority use, to get that clarification from what Center Region Park and Rec was doing, how they interpreted that.
Okay.
You know, because we heard exclusive, exclusive, exclusive over and over that night, and we just wanted to make sure that that was not the term of the agreement, and that's not how it was being applied. And while it's not stated directly in your memo, that is correct. It's not being interpreted as exclusive use. It's not being administered as exclusive use. It's being administered as priority use.
Well, yeah, let me clarify that. The memo also speaks to the fact that staff had asked the opinion of the College Township solicitor based on the June 2003 letter as to, what it means, what it is. And the response that we received back was that the letter was not a contract and was not enforceable as such. And beyond that, I think that speaks to the fact that priority is priority, exclusivity is exclusivity. And I don't believe that there is any indication in any document, and I believe that the solicitor's opinion supports the notion that there is no exclusivity that's involved relative to any of the commitments that have been made by College Township and that were memorialized in that letter in June of 2003.
Okay, just so I understand this, the solicitor's opinion is that the contract does not,
There is no
agreement
contract.
does not specify exclusive.
Correct.
Okay. So it's reaffirmed what we had said in what we thought was the intent 20 years ago.
Correct.
In writing, Okay, that's the part that was a little confusing to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and that might have been me, I kind of convoluted it to equitable, in my head, equitable use.
Okay.
Exclusivity or, to equitable use, yeah. But that, I mean, that's on council, whether or not we want to uphold that priority use too, right? So, right, I think there's a couple things to discuss, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Those were questions I had on the memo he just covered.
Okay, perfect. Questions, Adam?
No, Eric touched on the same question I had, if there were time slots on all day as opposed to a certain time.
At this point, I think it's probably a good time just to invite Center Region Parks and Rec to, come up if they have
I have a question.
comments. Go ahead,
I
Susan.
do have a question. I'm not as familiar with soccer as other people are here. There are several other center parks and rec facilities that have soccer fields. I know Autumnwood, obviously the Whitehall Road Regional Park will have fields. I'm trying to figure out in my own mind, how many fields do we have and what are the requirements? What does CSA and what do Celtic want those fields to be? Some of them are multi-use fields. Marty Bradley mentioned in his initial discussion in 2000 in the minutes that there was a search for a multi-purpose type of facility. So I need a little clarification around why, for example, why Fogelman in particular is sought after, and how many fields do we have that would be similar to Fogelman, and then that speaks to the equity issue. How are things available and for what purposes are they being used? So understanding that would help me too.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to need some help to try to answer that. Jeff
Yeah,
Hall, Center
I
Region
think
Park.
Center Region Parks and Rec, it's a good time, right?
What I can speak to is I can speak to what Fogelman is. Fogelman is a series of 3 different fields. There's one full-size field, and there is a medium-sized field and a smaller field, and they're kind of stout, one to the other. The full-side field is, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably the best field that we have in the center region at this point in time.
Definitely.
So just to clarify
Jeff,
that.
you just say your name and,
Sorry, Jeff Hall, I'm the sports supervisor at Center Region Parks and Rec.
thank you, sir.
So in terms of, I've heard language, the regulation field, or a field where you might have a tournament. So those would be fields that would be required for tournaments and for certain types of play, but in terms of practice, ongoing practice, is it required to have fields like that? That might be an answer or a question for the groups.
So
Oh, yeah.
what you were talking about before with multi-purpose, all of our fields are multi-purpose. We play football on baseball fields and baseball on football fields. All the fields we have are multi-purpose fields. The main field that Adam brought up at Fogelman is the only full-size soccer field we have in our system.
Thank you.
Now, we have open areas in parks that you may be able to fit full-size soccer fields, but that is the one field where you could play a full-size soccer match. And it is
helpful,
the
thank
best
you.
field. Yeah.
Is Whitehall gonna have a full-size soccer field?
2.
2? Oh, interesting. Just a little note. I think I needed the answer to
Hey,
that.
since he has a podium, can I do a follow-up?
Yep.
Did I hear you say there are other areas within the parks, within the regional park system, that could accommodate a full-size field?
Yes, but not on the same scale as Fogelman. In other words, you're not going to be playing on the same surface,
I'm
quality
sorry.
surface.
So, but dimension-wise,
Yes,
okay. But with an investment, for example, like what was made at Fogelman, the area is there that that field could be brought up to the same
potentially, yes.
potentially, because if I understand, that's kind of what happened at Fogelman 20 years ago, right?
It was 20 years ago, I can barely remember that.
Well,
I was part of those conversations.
Actually, the Fogelman Field was literally a farm field. And so it was built.
Okay, well, that
from
answers my
scratch.
question. I was on the planning commission at the time, so I remember we did a land development
Yep,
plan.
yep.
You know, we approved land development plan. But the area exists within what's already a center region park, that with some kind of investment, you could some partnership or whatever could create a field similar in quality to Fogelman,
I would say potentially you could do that.
potentially, okay.
Excellent.
That's all I had for Jeff.
Any other
Susan,
questions
did you get
for
enough
Jeff?
information?
I think so. Yeah, and I think my understanding is that the field at Fogelman was not in the condition that the fields in the other parks are in now. So getting Fogelman from where it was to the point that it is at now was a very expensive endeavor, and there was extensive work done with CSA and partnerships with the township and grants that were awarded too. So it would be a different.
Okay, good. All right, so I will invite CSA up first this time, since we heard from Celtic last time. And so when you approach the podium, just go ahead and say your name, your title, who you're representing. We know you're representing CSA, but yeah.
So I'm Matt Vidick. I'm on the board of directors for Center Soccer Association. I've been asked to speak on our behalf since I have a lot of familiarity with this. Also attending from our board is Jeff Garrigan and Winter Adams. And Jeff is our fields director, so he has a good concept of how we use fields.
Hey, Matt, just so you know, we're going to try to limit these comments for CSA and Celtic to 15 minutes, okay?
Okay.
So if staff could just help me kind of keep track of time, thanks. Thanks.
So just like basing myself here off of what Adam kind of started with is sort of the background. I'd like to add that, and I'm here to address the priority use issue primarily. It's important to understand how that field came about, and what I ended up doing after the initial inquiry started here was I compiled every document that we had on the development of the field, going back to the very first mention of the field in the minutes in 2000. So while everybody, that was looking around in other offices only had this little piece of paper with the memo to Marty Bradley, we had every single document that represented a communication to College Township. It was also best represented on the site plan as a collaborative venture between College Township, Center Soccer Association, State College Area School District, and the PADCNR. Now, you have to picture that this was, while we were interacting with College Township on, you guys want to build a park, we want to put soccer fields in it, how do we make that happen? That was our approach there, but at the same time, the field still had to be leased from State College Area School District, which we had to also present ourselves as the user, and that also went into the completion of the DCNR grant. So, and if I'm saying anything, if I have anything wrong, Adam was there, so he would know. So, the way we look at this, from the conception of it, all the way through that document that I provided, which was all of those meetings, public meetings, school district meetings, including and ending with the master plan, and even Hoffman Popovich has a piece in there. We've seen this from the get-go, as it's described here as a collaborative venture. It's a partnership, and all three partners and plus the DCNR are all still here. And at the end of the line, when this was completed, we were given that memo stating that we had priority use of the fields as managed by CRPR. When you start thinking about priority use, also before I get on that, the DCNR grant would not have been granted had we not put in $150,000. That was an item that we were bringing to the table to make it happen. College Township put in a little more than that. In the end, we put in 30% of the money of cash. State College Area School District donated the land, College Township put in their share, and then DCNR put in theirs. So it really was this collaborative venture. The reason we had to do it, it was a very severe deficit of fields. Center soccer was probably a little bigger than we are now, but we were on every patch of grass that you could find. And that was in a time, not only was Fogelman not built, Circleville was not built, Homestead was not built. I think the only fields around were Orchard, Fairbrook, and then a lot of the little pocket parks. So it comes into play that our intent was to design a soccer park. That was what we contributed to the project, was what we wanted the fields to look like. And as a result of that, we ended up, we were looking for something that would guarantee us use in what was a very successful public-private partnership. I want to also talk about the priority use, what it means to us. I mean, when you start looking around at all these fields, for an organization of our size, which last spring we had about over 830 players. Every year since I've been more heavily involved, we've had over 1,000 members every year with the exception of 2020. So there's a constant influx of people. There's a constant, people love the sport. They move in town. They join our organization. There are also other soccer organizations as we see. When you talk about priority use for a soccer club like us, which is why we built the field, it means we can operate programs. We have a home base to operate. So right now we are using, Jeff's here to kind of explain this, many other fields to kind of house all these different programs, and having priority use makes us be able to better organize and provide these programs. But one key point I want to add on priority use, I watched the video, and Richard Franke mentioned and brought up the idea that priority use does not mean exclusive use. And it does not mean exclusive use, but the problem that you see here is that of the sliver of time that we need that we use for our priority use, it's also the same time that any other sports organization in the same sport, serving the same market, with the same kids, doing the same things is going to want. So that's a problem that the priority use establishes us as having some standing over as a result of what we did to create the park. And just to get an idea, I mean, we've got programs with kids starting at age 5 to adults over 75. And anything that would reduce our use of that field would impact all those programs and cause us to have to really move things around. And the other key thing I looked at was how much time is our priority time. So we have a pretty set concept of who we're serving and what time they are available, our members. And if you take all the hours in a year, look at all the hours the park is open as a park, which is dawn to dusk, year-round, but then take a look at when groups can play soccer, and that's only from April to the end of October. We are using about 20 hours a week from that in those 6 months for 24 weeks. That ends up being 11% of all the available time in the park is all we are using. But if you go back, we put in 30% of the money. So in that way, this is how this kind of arrangement is supposed to work. There was a little bit, we put in a lot more than we're using, but for us, that is the absolute most important time, because our members aren't going to play it, whatever, like, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday because they're in school. The kids are in school, the adults are working. And that's just a key point I wanted to make, I thought about after the meeting. The other thing about priority use is they were used. We were party to one at Whitehall, which we eventually abandoned due to COVID. We were set to raise funds in March of 2020, and that timeline just completely dissolved. So I think there are opportunities to do some similar things out there that we're still eyeing as our club gets back up to our full operation. And we had over 1,000 members in the last year. You know, in all of this, like, the one thing I want to conclude here with is when you look at the memo, this memo that grants us priority use, it also states there's a mechanism in place to manage this. And in that memo, it says, to the extent Center Soccer Association's priority use, additionally, it is expressed that the intention of College Township Council that in recognition of CSA's financial contribution to the project, that CSA be granted priority consideration in the scheduling and use of the Hauserville Park fields. Center Region Parks and Recreation shall administer this scheduling and use in accordance with all relative agreements involving the State College Area School District. So I think there is a mechanism to manage this. We don't and have no intention of giving up our priority use. This is still an ongoing relationship with all these parties that built it. In 2007, we were asked to contribute $37,000 for improvements to the sprinkler system and irrigation, which we did. There was no contract for that. So I think relying on the idea that it's a contract, doesn't look like a contract, I think that's a bit distracting. This is really a partnership among these key organizations that raised the money, provided all the infrastructure to make it happen, and that was something we did, or were a party to, along with College Township. And you know, I brought this box, wherever it is. It's 20 years old. It's full of what CSA did at the time to raise their $150,000. So if you were in school, this might have been in it. Fields of Fun. There's a box here of newspaper clippings that people signed their name and sent their money in. I mean, that's how we raised the $150,000. So it wasn't necessarily one big donation. And I think I don't know if we have time for Jeff to explain or answer any questions, but you know, the one thing I want to leave you with is,
We got about 5 minutes, Matt,
Okay.
probably, yeah.
this was a very complex project. It was very meaningful for the community. We solved an incredibly important need. And for it to just kind of rely on this memo and that big PDF I got you after I found all those documents, I don't think it's serving the effort that was put in. So my request is, as this review is made, that we better confirm and put all of this agreement in something that's much more prominent, so everybody knows how that field is there, what our role is, who has priority, and that's what my request. So I don't know if Jeff has anything to add about how we use fields.
You have about 5 minutes, Jeff. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Garrigan. I'm a board member with Center Soccer as well. I think Matt and I could argue, and we still argue, about who has the longest tenure with Center Soccer. So I've been involved with Center Soccer for probably 20 plus years, so I'm very familiar with the organization and the area as well. My main responsibility as the board member is to manage the fields, manage and coordinate the fields. I can tell you that Fogelman is our anchor field for our organization, and this partnership is working. I can tell you that Fogelman is an absolute gorgeous field. There are, as Adam said, there's 3 levels to that complex. There's a variety of fields, smaller and larger, at that location. And again, our main base of operation comes from Fogelman Fields. We run 3 seasons, as Matt mentioned, spring, summer, and fall. There's a level of complexity to managing and coordinating the fields because there's different programs during different times or different seasons. One of the complexities, as an example, is our travel program, which is our older kids program. There's not much activity in the fall because a lot of those kids are playing middle school and high school soccer, but then it ramps back up in the spring. So there's a level of complexity in scheduling all the fields. We use Fogelman Fields, I would say we occupy the field 6 of the 7 days of the week. We're good stewards of the field. We like to give it a rest. It does require some rest time because it does get heavily used. So I would say that, 6 of those 7 days we're occupying the field. And again, we like to rest it for 1 day. As Matt mentioned, I'd like to say also that we've got player ranges from 5 to 75. That's our kids program and our adult program. So I think we service a good matrix of the state college community. As you guys mentioned, there are goals there. We have 18 goals at Fogelman Fields right now. We lock those goals after we're done using them. We place them off the fields. We coordinate with Center Region Parks. They mow the fields, obviously. They also paint the fields. We're in, I'll say, constant contact with them. They have the combos to our locks so that they can, if they need to move them or they need to separate them. We lock those for, 2 reasons. One main reason is just risk and managing risk. We've noticed over the past 5 or 8 years that if they don't get locked, kids start playing on them. They start pulling the nets, they start jumping on the frames, and some of those goals are rather big. So if they would fall or tip, we felt that was irresponsible of us. And then also, some of our coaches don't do a good job of moving those goals off the field, so we have them move the fields or the goals off and lock them. Just to quantify, as Matt did, I did a little math as well. I'll say this is an average calculation. I call it touches. There's about 1,000 touches during the week on Fogelman Field. What I mean by that, there's 1,000 people during our programs. Now that could be, we've got programs, twice a week there, games on weekends. I just quantified that to say there's 1,000 touches on the field on average week. This just represents Fogelman. Like I said, this is our anchor field. We also accommodate programming through 3 other Center Region Parks fields, 1 individual or private field that we use, and then we also engage with the school district because of their turf fields. The school district has 3 turf fields, so we engage with use of those turf fields, and the lights as well. That's a big attraction as well, the lights. So in conclusion, I would say the partnership has worked. I think from my perspective as the field guy, it's absolutely necessary that you have consistent field space to run a successful program.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just ask if Center Region has anything to add to that, Center Region Parks and Rec, to what was said from CSA. If not, we'll just go to council with questions and you guys are prepared to, answer anything. Okay. Go ahead, Susan. You want to have any questions for Center Soccer specifically?
Sorry, I was getting a text from work. I do have a question. Marty Bradley was leading the effort at the time, and I'm curious, does anyone have any insight into why, if there was an intent to use the fields in perpetuity and that the generous funds that were raised and donated would become something that would look more like a contract? Why wasn't there a contract made at the time? Do you know anything about that? I didn't see anything in your...
There isn't anything that would be very direct.
Right.
So when I found that box of donations, there was a letter in it that actually was the initial letter to College Township that didn't make it in the packet, that basically was confirming a conversation between Adam and Center Soccer, discussing the need to donate either $100,000 or $150,000 to make it happen. And Center Soccer's response included if we had appropriate access for the fields. And that is what kicked off the project and the discussion. And I don't know if I said this when I was speaking, but the timeline for this was so compressed that I don't think I don't think it was the most important thing at the time, because we are a soccer club with, no physical assets other than soccer goals. So I think it was a case of we had to put up and actually raise the money and do that. And once it was concluded, we just got rolling into operations. And then the 2007 request happened, and I think everybody just assumed the memo was what we see it as today.
Yeah, just some additional information. I don't disagree with anything that Matt has said here, but the other factor that likely played into this is the fact that there was DCNR grant money that was involved in the project, and that would have, in all likelihood, no, there's no question, that would have precluded any kind of an actual
Understood.
contract or an agreement.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a better answer.
Well, like I said, I don't disagree with anything
Yeah.
that you had said there, but I think the overriding issue there was because there was state grant money involved, that there was not an ability to have a contract that went beyond what
Right.
you saw in that June of 2003 letter.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I know Marty, so I was curious why the absence of a contract, and if Marty were working on this.
Anything else?
I think that's it for now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anthony, questions for Center Soccer?
Not questions for center soccer per se, but if I can.
Comments, yeah.
So, and I vaguely remember this, I was on the planning commission as well back then. But, it was a grant, so what was the contribution? Was there a match for the grant? Is that
Yeah,
where the
there would have been
150?
there would have been a match. I don't recall with specificity either the percentage or the amount. But, yeah, as Matt had alluded to earlier, I think that the match, the initial match, or the initial monies for the match for the grant came both from College Township and from Center Soccer, or portions of Center Soccer's donation.
But that's what, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see, and I couldn't find anywhere, what would have been the total match? I didn't see College Township's
Yeah,
contribution.
that's what I don't recollect.
I didn't hear all of that, but it's not uncommon for DCNR grants to require 50% local match. So it wouldn't surprise me if, in order to receive $150,000, you had to put up $150,000.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
would not
that's
be
what I'm-
unusual.
That's what I'm gathering, but I didn't.
Yeah,
know if there was any
I'm
confirmation.
doing the same thing you are, Matt.
It's in there.
Because it's in there somewhere. I know that I saw it and I can't find it.
I'm looking too, so I will.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll come back to that. Eric? Okay. Well, while everybody's looking at that, we'll come back to that. You
It was
just-
173,000
That was the total match?
from the state.
Oh, 173 from the state.
College Township put in 173, and Center Soccer put in 150.
Okay. There you go.
And the DCNR grant was 150.
173.
Or
173.
173, okay.
Okay.
So it's possible that some of that College Township money went to match, if it was a 50% match.
Sure.
Okay. All right, at this point, we'll ask Celtic Soccer to come on up. We'll give you 15 minutes, so please state your name and your association.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name's Dan Meehan. I'm a board member for Celtic Soccer Club. I'm the director of facilities. I've been part of the board for about 10 years. I'm also a coach and a parent. So I've been here in town for 15 plus years. For context, I was part of CSA. My kids started out in CSA. I was a coach in CSA. I started their adult leagues, their adult premier league, not their adult leagues. They have great adult leagues. They're wonderful. I'm very familiar with their programming. Our intent, and I think it's important to say thank you for what you've done to these fields. We recognize that there's a lot of work gone into these fields, and they're very nice fields. So thank you for that. We're not here to refute or any of that at all. So I think we're here to get equitable access. It's a public facility. We're nonprofit organizations. We want access to the fields. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. If it means we have to contribute money, then we can do that. A few things I just want to address real quick. Fogelman, yes, is open, wide open during the day, but kids are in school, as Matt said. And we hear this comment a lot. I've heard it many, many times. But during the evening time, it's fully booked up by CSA. No one else can use it. And on the weekends, rightly so, they have games. I don't believe all the time, but so it's in use. It is the only full-size field in the region, not just in the township, or not just in the township here in the borough, but in the whole Center Parks and Rec region, minus the high schools. So that's what we use. We have 5 teams that play full field soccer. They play at the high school, so we fight high schools. We fight not fight. We up against the school district for field space there. But it's been okay. It's turf fields and it's good. There's another field out at the center, I believe, which is it's part of Penn United, which is who CSA is partnering with as well. And so we have inquired about the new fields. Another thing, Jeff says they're going to be used for football, flag football. So we will get some use to there. That'll be a great thing. We're excited about that for sure. But it still doesn't help our need. Again, they're the only fields. And I just wanted to point out too, CSA has Fogelman too, but Circleville Park, Hempstead Park, so Circleville, Homestead, and the municipal field, I believe they have equipment there, and I believe they're the only folks that use that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if anybody else uses those other fields.
Sorry, which field?
Circleville, the upper field at Circleville. Other, yes or no?
No, they use Circle.
I mean, do other groups? I'm just trying to point out there's other fields that they use exclusively.
No, not true.
Not true? Okay.
Grace Prep is soccer at Homestead.
Okay. Circleville, and then the municipal building was the only other one.
Yeah, we don't control that.
Okay, sorry, my fault. So I just wanted to point a couple things out there. And I mean, if we want to bring up numbers, we have similar numbers there. Again, I ran the adult programs, and I think you did list your teams in that group, but correct me if I'm wrong, I believe 9 of them were part of Penn United, and 10 of them were CSA teams. So I think your numbers on the youth teams are pretty much identical as what we have. So I'm just trying to point out, we have equal numbers of people across the board. We don't focus on adult. I mean, their program is very soccer for all, which is great. It's well needed. We focus on the more competitive kids, which is normal in any town, Pittsburgh, Philly, Lancaster, Newark. So that's, I think I just wanted to point these out, that we're offering different products too. We have the same amount of people, but we're just offering different products. So that's kind of it. I mean, I just wanted to say thank you for this. We're here at the end of the day, like I said, we just would like equitable use to the park. Adam, I love the idea of you all buying those goals to make it an easier thing. We would be willing to contribute and help fundraise to buy extra equipment. I think that's a wonderful solution. And I just want to point out, our goal here isn't to push anybody out. Our goal here is to primarily get access for games. We bring teams in from Pittsburgh, and we cannot play. The only places we can play are the high school. We can't play with the older kids who run very fast and are very quick and strong. They're more prone to get injured on the fields that aren't as high quality as Fulton. So that's another reason why we want this. And again, at the end of the day, we're trying to get access for the kids. So I believe that's kind of all I have to say. If there's any questions.
All right, we'll start out with Eric. Questions for Kelton?
Not really.
Okay. Susan?
No, I think you've done a good job explaining some things. I might have some questions for Center Parks and Rec after, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the time.
Okay, well, I think if Center Parks and Rec has anything to add at this time, please go ahead. I think there's probably going to be some questions around scheduling, how all that goes, so maybe a little summary of how you guys do that. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm Christy Owens, the Center Region Parks and Recreation Director. I'm in the position only, so many months, so I'm relatively new to the position, but I've been with Center Region Parks and Rec for about 3 years. Haven't had the opportunity to officially introduce and meet with both groups, but happy to sit down. We're kind of, Center Region Parks and Rec is kind of that glue that holds, the schedules together and provides that equity, and we want that. So for our programs and our parks to function successfully, we need to have good relationships with key stakeholders like Center Soccer, who invest in our facilities. Sometimes we don't have these facilities without those investments. Whitehall Road Regional Park, prime example. We try to provide a mix of athletic facilities so that we are equitable. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. We're not trying to exclude anyone. We're trying to uphold priority agreements that were in place with College Township. We don't own these fields facilities, but we have a significant investment in the amount of maintenance that Jim Carpenter, who's sitting here, who's our parks manager, significant investment in maintaining those fields, mowing those fields, lining those fields. There's a cost, which is why there's a cost to rent those fields. We don't own, as you know, any soccer goals for any of our facilities. Whitehall Road Regional Park is coming on board. We don't anticipate that that will be ready until possibly next fall. But we know that there are several leagues that are really eyeing that facility because we have, the ability to have a full-size field. Right now, again, we have investments and priority use agreements in place with Happy Valley Adventure Bureau for that facility. So again, we are going to get into these same conversations where at some point those investments have a shelf life and those contracts have to be renegotiated. And so from our perspective in managing that regional facility, I think that will be our approach, is trying to renegotiate those contracts as we go through the years, because there's a reinvestment into those facilities. The same is true for College Township. There's potentially reinvestments and there's maintenance costs and capital costs. Center Region Parks and Rec doesn't typically invest in capital equipment for facilities like Fogelman. We are looking at investing in goals for Whitehall Regional Park primarily because of the priority use and trying to provide that equity so we can have more groups using those facilities. But yeah, it can be a challenge. It's something you kind of have to really jockey around, but we certainly want the most amicable resolution, I think, to this. So.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Comment.
Yep.
That's what we do. We bring people together here. So we provided the format for you to meet the I'm sorry.
And we appreciate that, so thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay. Okay, so Chris, if you could just hang out for a second. We'll start out with general comments to all, and if there's a specific question to someone, we just ask you to come up and speak into the microphone for a circuit group or party. We'll go to you, Anthony, first, if you're ready. If not.
Yeah, actually, I did have a question, Chrissy. Yeah. So how many, just remind me, I think I should know Whitehall, but how many potential fields for soccer use are there throughout the Center Region Parks network?
Well, I'm going to have Jim or Jeff help me with that one. I don't know the total number off the top of my head.
4, 6, 10, 14, 18, 20.
So that's kind of a loaded question.
Actually, Susan just helped me. So I have an understanding. With that. So then to tie into that, so we'll say approximately 20. She actually did.
Yeah, but so I'm going to use the Celtics, for example. They use Fairbrook Park. Sometimes they have 7, 8, 9, 10 fields there. So I don't want to call Fairbrook one soccer field. Right. It's got multiple smaller fields. And I just used Fairbrook, for example, but you could say the same thing at Fogelman. You guys have, 7 or 8 fields going up there as well. So that number is constantly moving.
No, I'm just trying to understand, so if we say 20, and understand it could be minus that and so forth, but what's the primary use as far as the associations? Is it practice? Is it competitive? It's both, but can you practice on a half field or something like that?
Yes.
It's possible.
Yes.
So with the potential of that many fields, and then it's possible for practice, and then how things are scheduled, if it's known to be a practice or a competitive match.
Yeah, we don't ask them for their game schedules. We just have, we line fields for all the groups, or most of the groups, I should say.
Understood, but I meant, we'll say from a scheduling standpoint, if we know it's a game match, a competitive match,
yeah.
And, so you can schedule as such with that understanding that a particular field would be needed, if you will.
Right.
as opposed to practice.
Right.
And that's all I'm just trying to understand, what necessarily may be out there, and then trying to understand the scheduling, because I understand even though there's, we'll say 24 hours in the day, but there's also limited time to when a practice or a game match can happen. And that, I'll just leave it at that. That's what I
Okay.
wanted to start with.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to clarify and ask for members of council, and we'll start with you too, Anthony, because I don't think you were here in the first conversation, right? So, very aptly so, right? And Rich, as Rich always does, summarizes, very well, right? And I think we were all there where we said priority doesn't mean exclusivity, and that's why we're having this conversation. So I would ask that each member of council just simply state that the intent remains the same based off the memo, and if whether you still support the memo for center soccer having priority, but not exclusive.
Okay, no, I got you, and that helps me as well, as
Yeah.
far as questioning, from that perspective.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, so I mean, is that something you would still support? Priority, yes, we could still agree with that, but not exclusivity, because I think that gives CRPR a little bit better direction, right?
In how I'm reading the memo, it's granting priority consideration in the scheduling and use of the Hauserville Parks field. So,
Yeah.
and if we're defining priority as far as scheduling, then yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, now maybe this is something we need to tease out in subsequent, and I'll leave this as a comment, maybe subsequent meetings, whatever it may be, exactly how that priority is defined and extends, which I think is you guys are probably just wanting from us, right? But I would just ask each member of council. So thanks, Anthony. We'll go to Eric now.
That specific question?
Yeah, that specific question, any general questions or comments you have as well, yeah.
Then my answer is the same.
Yeah,
General comments. First, I would say what we're going through tonight is the reason we really need to put together a business plan for Parks and Rec. We've been talking about this for years, but this is a perfect example. Chrissy noted a number of issues in her comments that speak to things that would be addressed if we had a business plan that talked about boundaries and conditions for public-private partnerships. Having said that, though, I commend Center Region Park and Rec, College Township, the school district, and Center Soccer for pulling together that private-public partnership. We may look back on it now 20-some years later and pick at things that should have been or could have been or whatever, but the fact that everybody pulled together and pulled this off, and we have been able to benefit for how many years by what apparently is a outstanding facility, I think it's a credit to everyone that was involved. As far as the memo goes, I'm okay with it, the way it's written, and I'm okay with continuing to let them administer priority scheduling. And I don't care that it was 20 years ago, I think if somebody came to us, another entity, and wanted to do the same kind of partnership in exchange for priority scheduling, I'd say go for it, because that's how you get things done, if you can leverage additional resources to get things done. Now, the key there is that you have a business plan, and we learn from this process how to define the scope, and what Christy mentioned was shelf life, useful life. So if we end up migrating towards maintaining this relationship, I would offer that if there's a desire to have an end, or some kind of term to this, in most industries, when you invest money in something, particularly in my old line of work, there was a finite amount of time, and it was often referred to as useful life or shelf life. So just kicking around some ideas out there, maybe the time to revisit this arrangement is if and when you reach a point where there's a major investment needed in that facility, then you go to the original partners and see if they want to ante up again, and if not, you bring in new partners or whatever. But it seems to me that that would be a good threshold for revisiting the as of now undefined term of this agreement. But absent that reference to term, I'm a bit uncomfortable just arbitrarily saying, the term's up, until such time when there is a required reinvestment or something on the township's end or the school district or whatever. It seems to me that would be the more appropriate time.
Lease comes up in 2 years, right? Or
Well,
more than
I
that.
just wanted to make a quick comment on that. And I did not look up the actual execution of the lease period, but it is a 25-year lease period, and I do know that it was not executed before August 14th of 2001. So it was executed sometime after that. So I think it's reasonable to assume that in 2026, approximate time frame is when the actual 25-year lease
Okay.
will be up with.
I thought
the
I saw
school district.
2027 in some of the paperwork that.
And it may
CSA
be,
has.
like I said,
It is
Somewhere
2027.
around.
I don't know
It is
the exact date, but it's 2027.
Okay, that I had not looked up, and I was just going by some of the information that was in. No, we're good, but I was just going off of that. So it was 2026, 2027, no, that's fine. So
Amazing.
that is,
Did you think you'd see 2027 at that?
Were you,
no,
Oh, yeah.
I did not,
So-
and I still may not.
That's, to me, would be a much more ideal threshold for revisiting the partnership, should you not need a major investment before then. Unless, of course, and this is the last thing I'll say, one of the parties was not performing up to expectations. And everything I've heard tonight is it's been a productive and positive relationship. So should that change, then that might be another mechanism for tripping or revisiting the current arrangements. And the reason I mention that is I find that, to me, a little bit more attractive than what staff floated out there for discussion points. Because if we get to those, I think they raise some other questions and challenges if we were to get into that discussion as part of the resolution.
it was March 31st of 2027.
What was it?
March 31st of 2027 is the end of the 25-year lease.
Should have asked.
Okay.
Should have asked
So that's
him
it.
first.
Susan?
So really good points. Everyone's made good points. I think thinking this through, I stand with the intention of the memo. So that was your original question. It's still not clear to me what priority consideration means. And that, I think, in talking through the business plan concept, the idea of priorities for games, perhaps tournament games versus practices, putting in a time limit such as 4 days a week versus, 6 days a week, that doesn't reflect the actual use of the fields by the different teams and the different players at the same time. So having some sort of, I don't know, I'm a medical provider, a triage system for defining how those fields are used, and then trying to make it possible when there is a situation, if there is some sort of conflict, perhaps that's where the priority consideration would kick in, if there are two types of games that are being played and in need of the same type of field. I mean, clearly, it's a scheduling and logistical challenge, and I've tried hard to wrap my head around how this all looks on paper when you try to put two groups together. The other part that's occurred to me, a very good point about public and private partnerships and wanting to be able to encourage those and be the township that does that. On the other hand, we do have a different population now, and we're a growing community, and so there will be more pressure in the future on limited facilities. And then how do we work that through in that business plan so that we make those facilities available? We have more kids playing soccer. There's more of an interest in soccer now. So being able to play on a field that wouldn't be possible if CSA hadn't partnered years ago is really important. It makes the area attractive. I just would like to see more of a compromise in some sense. Somehow we're here at the table tonight because it wasn't possible to craft a compromise before we got here. And I'm not sure what the root of that is, and I don't know that this is the forum for it, but I certainly think in the spirit of sportsmanship, there might be some opportunities to revisit that. I hope so.
Thanks.
If I may, and Susan touched on it, and that's what triggered the question. So I guess it's a question to CR, Center Region Parks. What is the definition of priority use, or how would you utilize that in scheduling?
It's funny because I came from a facility where we dealt with multiple partnerships. We had partnerships with lacrosse and we had partnerships with soccer, and it was really tricky. And I think for me, priority use is allowing an organization to be on a facility for a set amount of time. And you have to have, kind of criteria to define what that actually means. If you don't have that criteria, it makes it very, very tricky. And so we had multiple groups going at different times. We had soccer and lacrosse. They owned their own equipment. And it was very tricky from a maintenance standpoint because we constantly were trying to deal with different shapes of fields, different goals, and jockeying goals back and forth on the fields. So, priority use is something that I think it really has to be a well thought out plan. For us, just conceptually, we look at the whole CRPR system as one regional system. Mm-hmm. And so we prioritize Center Region Parks and Rec programs first. And then we look at, okay, do we have agreements with other leagues? And then we prioritize those. And then, okay, what's left? But we have to have a blend and a mix among the whole system, not just one park. But what makes it tricky is when we don't own those amenities, it's hard because they have to agree to share that equipment. And as you heard, that liability and that risk of sharing your equipment doesn't always work. If Center Region Parks and Rec bears the risk and has the same, kind of jockeying of goals back and forth, then that's something we would have to manage and we would have to consider that. And that's also an investment and something that is outside our norm. Because right now, the leagues do bring their own equipment in, they use their own equipment. So we're in a really tricky situation, in my opinion, because priority use is really hard to define unless Center Soccer is willing to give up a couple of days a week, but then you have the goal issue, so.
Anything else, Anthony?
I understand. I guess it really has to be defined. If we're going with this memo, they really have to have a definition, if you will, or Center Region Parks has to have a definition on that. And I'm going to echo Eric's comments and everything that he said. Everything in that memo says priority use, scheduling and such. And then it's up to Center Region Parks and Recs to handle that.
Yeah, I would just close. To me, it seems council's opinion probably doesn't differ too much from when the memo was written about 20 years ago. I support the intent of the original memo and awarding priority use, and I really like the idea of what Eric brought up, because, Matt had brought up, we probably need to codify this a little bit more, right? Given an end date. Perhaps it is aligning it with the end of that original lease agreement and say, okay, priority use, not in perpetuity, but priority use through the original lease agreement. I really like that idea. Maybe that's, a new memo that we should probably bring up. But I support priority use to honor both, what CSA had invested in and has done over the years. But again, I agree with exactly what Eric's saying. You can't just keep it in perpetuity. You can't just say forever. And so I also support, the idea of a business plan in the future. We had to get some better guidance and guidelines on how facilities are used. And this whole idea of, originally council, none of us remembers the council. Do you remember council then?
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission. But none of us remembers the council then. I'm just giving him a hard time. I know he wasn't.
I've been around for a while. That's how you become an expert, right?
Yeah.
Just hang around long enough.
But
people think you're an expert. Yeah. That's what it is.
Adam was here. We know that. So I also support the idea of, I think council in their wisdom then, had said, hey, Center Region Parks and Rec, you guys are the professionals in this stuff, right? We don't do this thing every day. We would depend on you to try to, figure out this priority use, which seems to be a hard calculation to do. It's math beyond me. I mean, that's something that I wouldn't, especially dealing with the factor of, not owning the equipment. So, I mean, for me, as a council member, my ask would be, can CRPR sit down at the table, once again after this meeting with CSA and Celtic and kind of figure out, everybody come together with this priority use, kind of idea and figure it out. What's it look like? Is it what it currently is? Because one party's not happy with what it currently is. Another party's really happy. So maybe we need to have something else going on.
I just have a couple things to say. Number one, when this started in 2002, my boss at the time, Ron Woodhead, handed me the agreement and said, here, we're going to follow this for 25 years. So that's what the priority has been there since March 31st of 2002. And that's what I was told to do, and I assume that came from College Township Council. I can't verify that, I don't know that, it was 20 years ago. But that's what it is. Back to your point about sitting down with Center Soccer and the Celtics, State College Warriors lacrosse, Little Lions field hockey, whatever the rugby association is, I can't think. Like, where does it end? Are we asking them to give up 5 days a week for each group?
Don't look at me. I know.
He's looking at you.
No, I'm just trying, I was looking at him because you were looking at him, but I'm trying to figure out exactly, could you restate what exactly your question is?
I guess, you're saying we should sit down with Center Soccer and the Celtics soccer group. They're not the only ones that want to use Fogelman. State College Warrior Lacrosse, who has used Fogelman a handful of times, as soon as they hear, they're going to want to sit down and say, hey, we want a piece of that.
Well, I mean, that was news to me, yeah. I mean, if we talk about equitable use, right, if there's multiple, unless anybody disagrees with what I'm saying, we can bring it back to the rest of the council, but if there's 5 parties that want to use Fogelman Fields, then what our memo states is we're challenging you guys and asking you guys to figure out that priority use, right? Yes. There's 5 parties.
Yes.
And so, look, if 75% of the field's dedicated to soccer, then obviously you can weight that, right? I mean, we can get into how you weight stuff. I mean, I could take you through a whole exercise. I've done a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, if 75% of it's dedicated to soccer, obviously those soccer organizations have a little more weight, right? I'd be more than happy to sit down at the table and help out with this too. I mean, I'm not just saying, hey, you guys do it, and I'm going to turn a blind eye. Yeah. Go ahead. Anybody else? Yeah.
I think the really important piece is defining priority and really having a clear definition of priority and applying that definition equitably across whether it's 2 soccer franchises or clubs or it's multiple sport clubs that want to use those fields. But I do think we recognize that we don't have a paper trail, but that 21, 23 years ago, the conversation started. We didn't document them well. We don't have good guidance from what was being said to people, and there were handshake agreements made and agreements made, by email that we can see now. We're trying to piece something back together again that's just not clear. So I think understanding that, recognizing that it was a public-private partnership, and there was private money and generous money donated. There was also public money that was put into this project. And so I think the fields have to be available publicly as well.
I mean, Susan's comment, I think she said it best. This is not the forum to brainstorm this out. We're not going to solve this tonight. I mean, we have to, personally, what I want to see is a council consensus on our guidance on a path forward for resolution, right? It's not going to be solved in this forum. Anybody else? Comments there? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're being a little unfair to Center Region Park and Rec here. They've been administering what they interpret to be the direction that's in the memo. And I think they've been doing a great job with it. And I think what we owe them tonight, I know we're not going to solve this problem, but what we owe them tonight is a consensus or a statement to continue doing that or not. But just to throw it back onto them and say, figure it out, Adam's already been down that road, correct me if I'm wrong?
Well,
It didn't really work out, did it? Or how did it work out?
Well,
That's why we're here, right?
right, that's why you're here.
So I sense, looking at body language around the room, that what we need to come out of tonight's meeting with is some affirmation or not, that to continue doing what they're doing under the current agreement, and maybe we've uncovered some mechanisms for a broader revisit of it, at a certain threshold.
You're exact, you put in good words kind of where I was thinking too. I mean, there's a short term, right? We're already in the midst of a fall soccer season, right? So recognizing Center Region Parks and Rec and everybody else in soccer organizations is already planning everything out, is already having it on the calendar, or is doing it very, very soon. There's a short term, hey, Center Region Parks and Rec, do we as council want to consensus say, keep doing what you're doing, but for next season, right, we need to come up with a more equitable use or something along those lines.
Well, I've said that, I wouldn't even say next season, I would say when the lease is up, then we revisit this, because, otherwise, we're just kicking this can down to next year. We don't have to decide that tonight, but I think it's important that everybody that's here tonight leaves the room with some understanding of whether we support Center Region Park and Rec continuing to do what they're doing right now for the foreseeable future, at least, which I think we have that consensus, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question just to present to everybody as an individually, do you support what, for Center Region, what Center Region Parks and Rec is scheduling right now as priority? Do you support that, yes or no? I'll be the first to answer that question. I'll say, yes, I support that. I support that for one season. I think we need to address this before 2027. But Susan, or go ahead, Eric. Yeah.
I support it up until the time that we collectively agree that it's time to revisit it. I don't support saying definitely next season we have to have a resolution to this, because I think that's being a bit unfair to Center Soccer and all the effort that they put into it. The lease, though, on the other hand, gives you a lockstep defined end and opportunity to revisit all terms, I think.
I guess that's where I'm misunderstanding. I thought that we were saying perhaps maybe
Is the lease next year?
The lease is 2027.
Okay, so that's the differential that I'm making, is that
I mean, I thought we were at this table because we're saying that the priority scheduling isn't working. We have parties saying it. I think that's why, I thought that's why that was brought up.
Well, if you're asking me that question, then I would respectfully disagree, because I would say that's how it was set up 20 years ago, and that's how it's being administered, and the parties who came together on it are being served. And I would offer that others who would like to have that opportunity, maybe they could do the same thing Center Soccer did. I mean, Center Soccer was in this, what I heard tonight was they were in the same position 20-some years ago. And they went out and raised some money, got a grant, partnered with somebody, and bought themselves, earned themselves some priority scheduling. Am I incorrect? Help me out, because I'm kind of basing my opinion on those assumptions here.
Adam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I think you have to put this into some context. At the time that the public-private partnership evolved, Center Soccer was the only organization that was operating any kind of a soccer program in the Center region. So there was only one entity to deal with. And the secondary part of this is the input of the grant money, the state grant money, into this project. And the reason there's not a lease agreement or a contract or something more substantial that people such as Marty Bradley would otherwise have put in place is because there can't be that kind of exclusivity that is provided when utilizing state funds or even utilizing township funds. So I think you have to put all of that into context as you make some determinations about how to move forward relative to what is the definition of priority use, et cetera, et cetera. I absolutely agree that when the lease comes due, that is an opportunity to revisit all of this. And keep in mind that there's a potential that the school district doesn't renew the lease. So those are all very real potentials that could occur here. But I think you have to keep those things in mind as you're having some of these conversations. The time and the circumstances, place, time, and circumstances initially, and the fact that public monies were brought to bear in the construction of the park. And so while this in all probability would not have moved forward without Center Soccer's participation, and I was there and I know how important that it was, it doesn't detract from the fact, and it doesn't override the fact that public monies were put into the park for the development thereof. And because there's public monies that are involved in this park, there can't be an exclusive utilization of the facility. And again, you're absolutely correct to your very earlier comments that you made. The park is open, somebody wants to have a pickup game. There are no restrictions relative to that. This all comes back to the definition of priority use. And the problems that we have with the organizations is everybody has the same priority because everybody needs the same time slots in order to exercise their program. So that's all that I wanted to hopefully clarify.
All right, thanks, Adam. Council, we spent a lot of time on this one. It's very important. Let's try to wrap this up if we can and move on to the next one with a path forward and how we want to go about it. So one thing we have consensus on, right, is the intent of the original memo, right? We all support that. We support the priority use. I think where we're teetering at is how to define that priority use and what it is, right? So final thoughts, Anthony?
So I support the memo and how it reads. Priority use and scheduling handled by CRPR. I still say that definition, there should be something defined there. I don't want to sell CRPR, short, but that needs to be defined. But I can't say it more eloquently than Eric had. I think if we support that memo, the next time to revisit it would be when we approach the lease expiration and we ask Center Region Parks and Rec to do exactly what that memo says.
Okay. Susan?
I think that I support the memo and its intent to the best of my ability because I wasn't there. I'm uncomfortable that it wasn't more clearly defined as a contract. And I do think that I would like a better definition of priority and a mechanism to more clearly define that and make those fields available at times for other clubs and make those priorities. That doesn't give you the clarity you want. I don't know if I can give 100% consensus. That's my opinion.
I'll let you have final. So, yeah, again, I mean, I support the memo and its intent and the original ask to CRPR for priority use. And where I stand and I hinge on is that definition of priority use. And I support the perpetuity, the memo standing up until, if we were to agree on, when that lease with the school district would end. I mean, I think that's a very, valid point on a time frame, right? That's an initial investment. So, I mean, I would feel comfortable if we could get something, more, in scheduling or writing or, to say, just from a council standpoint, that, hey, I've done my due diligence to, help out these parties. You know, if we're supporting that memo and we're saying, yeah, we want CRPR to do priority, you know, maybe we should give them some feedback and help in what priority means. So that's kind of what I support, right? You know, so I support that, you know, continued definition of priority to try to, you know, get more, try to at least get the perception that there's more equitable use. Because right now, what I'm hearing from the room is there's not the perception of equitable use. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, so I think Adam tried to do that.
Yeah.
And it didn't bear result. So in my opinion, we default back to, you know, the memo and the guidance that was given to staff at Center Region from the start until such time that there is an event that allows us to reopen this thing and then do what we all said needs to be done. So my short term is to just, you know, status quo. And when the opportunity presents itself, not at a staff meeting, not at a council meeting, but, you know, we engage. You know, maybe there won't be, you know, an agreement amongst the parties, but at that point, we will then probably have to ourselves define priority.
Just as a follow-up to that question, that point to CRPR or Celtic, you know, so what was it, about a month ago, the Celtic came and aired their grievances to us. Did you guys air your grievances to CRPR before you came to us for scheduling? And how did that conversation go?
Yeah, we've made requests. I guess we have made requests for Fogelman in the past. And having been a part of CSA and knowing the history, I guess we made requests way back. But since then, in the recent time, just thought it was a non-starter. So we haven't even made a request. And that goes the same for Circleville or Homestead or other fields. And again, it comes back to the goals. Because we don't have goals there, it seems. I mean, that's the impression we've always had, is it's a goal thing. There's organizations have goals there, and that's their field to use for the entire time too. And I think there is definitely wiggle room here too. I mean, we're just talking about games, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5. That's 8 hours, 16 hours a day, right? 16 hours for a weekend of soccer games. If they have 10 teams, 5 of them play home games. That's 5 hours of soccer on 16 hours of field. I could have my math wrong, but I mean, and the scheduling is still underway, by the way. The scheduling is not set at all, so that's just one of the comments.
So what I'm hearing is, I mean, you're saying, hey, we're willing to compromise just on games, right? Game time.
Yeah, that's kind of been our main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with the priority. I mean, I think you guys can talk about this, but you're right. You have to define priority if you want to. Priority has to be defined.
I mean, just on that point, I guess where I disagree on you, just because we tried once and we failed, doesn't mean we continue to just say, oh, well, we're going to give up. That's what I'm hearing. Like, if we can't come to a compromise the first time, well, then we come at it with a little bit different of an approach, or maybe the same approach, and we try to get more of a compromise.
Well,
I don't think that stops us from continuing to try to make it more equitable and us asking CRPR to facilitate that. That's all I'm saying.
My comment was more out of respect for the original agreement.
Yeah.
And not changing the rules of the game midstream based on what the original intent and understanding.
But no rules of the game have been defined.
Well, they are what they've been administering. Absent that, past practice becomes the
But
rules.
they can't even tell us what the past practice is. No, I've asked, and they said, well, we kind of just do it. But no one's codified a past, like, give me a plan, right? What's the plan? Like, how do you guys go about setting priority? You know, what do you say? Well, if I'm CSA and I say, well, I got 10 games, and then if I come in and, you know, and I'm Celtic and I say, well, I want this for 5 games, how do you guys go about it? That's what I think. That's the misunderstanding. Maybe each organization doesn't even understand that.
I think it comes down to ownership of goals. That is a big sticking point, you know, when it comes to priority use. Jeff can kind of speak to this.
So is that a showstopper, Christie? Because, I mean, if you tell me that, and if I'm Celtic, well, then I can put some of my goals there too.
Yeah.
You see where I'm coming at, folks? Like, this isn't a
Absolutely.
showstopper. Like, there's
Yeah.
ways to work around
Yeah.
this. Am I the only one seeing this?
I think that Center Region parks in general, we've grown, and there's so many more leagues now. And so we're running out of field space, as you can tell. That's why we built Whitehall. That's why there's a need for additional fields at Whitehall.
Yeah.
Although there's other leagues popping up in the area, there's other facilities popping up in the area, there's definitely a dire need for fields, and right here is an example of it. But it does become an issue when it's jockeying back on the goals and trying to figure out the goal situation, because then Celtics has to pull all of their goals off to the side so that, or Center Soccer has to pull their goals off to the side so the Celtics can come
They
in.
pull off the side all the time anyhow. They lock them up.
Right. So I'll let Jeff kind of speak a little bit more to the scheduling aspect, because he's been doing this for a long time.
I don't want to keep you here much longer, but, so Jeff Garrigan from Center Soccer submits requests to me seasonally for field space. And on there it says Fogelman Field, 5 to 8 PM, Monday through Thursday. Saturday,
Yeah.
8 to 6, Sunday, whatever it is, 10 or 11 to, whatever those times are, right? So that's their priority, that's what they, in my eyes, the priority for them is what they submit in their request. If someone else comes along, group X comes along and says, hey, we'd like it Thursday nights from 5 to 8, sorry, it's not available.
Yeah. That kind of sounds like exclusivity to me. Opinions? Yeah, I mean, I
It's
don't know
not
how you crack
exclusive.
that
They- I mean,
nut.
if
I know I'm
someone-
not saying you need to do anything wrong, Jeff, but
No,
I
no,
don't know how you crack that
listen,
nut. Yeah.
if they come in and say, hey, we'd like to use it from 3 to 5, it's available. It's not exclusively to Center Soccer. They're taking 3 hours on a Thursday.
All right, so if I was Celtic and I submitted my request prior to CSA, would I get it?
We have a time frame. There's a time frame each season. For the spring, it's for submitting requests.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, yeah.
And again, it's not exclusive. There have been lacrosse games there. We've had soccer, Center Region Parks and Rec has had soccer camps there. It's never been exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep this dragging this on. I mean, I don't mean to discount anything that CRPR is doing. I don't mean to discount anything that CSA's had in the past. And, you know, I'm not trying to show favoritism at all here. But it is our job to make sure that there is equal public access to those facilities.
And we will
Right, and
do-
that's what we've been asked to consider.
We will schedule however
Yeah.
you feel we need to schedule.
Well, I don't want,
Yeah,
If I
let's
may-
not drag this on,
Yes.
yeah.
well, I don't want that. I don't want to have this conversation every year about who's getting a field.
I agree.
That's you guys.
I agree,
Yeah.
but what's on the table is, what do we need to do? You tell us. We've been doing what we have been doing for 20 years based on that.
Based on that memo.
Memo.
And I understand that.
Let me speak to Center Region Parks and Rec in general. My vision is that we will develop a better plan. And my vision is that we will work together. Jeff and I have not worked on this together. What's been in place clearly is not working here in this facility. And so we need to put our heads together. And I think Center Region Parks and Rec wants to be as equitable as possible. And if there's another way that we can kind of carve out a better method for scheduling so that there isn't this exclusivity or priority to a certain degree while also respecting our partners and our investments that are being made. We have to weigh that. And so I don't want to get into any more than that. I don't think it's the forum for it, but we're here to support and do what we need to do and try to develop a better policy so that it doesn't get to the level of confusion and everyone's pointing fingers back and forth, and we don't want that, so.
It's a start.
Yeah.
Hey, I would say, though, that if you want equal access, then you don't accept private money. Because once you accept private money, you have unequal access, and that's really what it boils down to today. You know, equal access to a public park, you don't take private money. Once you take private money, you give them something for it.
Time and place, like I said before, the circumstances were,
And I'm not opposed to
Very
taking private
different.
money, but 20 years ago, we didn't foresee this.
Well, and I think you have a valid point too, Eric, and what, you know, what CRPR has highlighted for me, right, is I think it's very hard to have both priority and exclusivity be mutually exclusive, right? You know, just from what Jeff's example shows, you know, time slots, times available, very, very difficult thing to do. You know, you're almost asking them to do the impossible, right?
We've inadvertently put them in a tough
Yeah.
position
Yeah.
with something that started out to be this wonderful thing.
Well, yeah, with the best of intentions, as
Yeah.
always, right? Yeah. Okay, any other members of council, final thoughts? We're gonna close this one out. We've given it a lot of time. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Any other final thoughts? Staff?
I only want to know if there is a direction from council to staff to do something, if anything. I think the takeaway here mostly this evening is to Center Region Parks and Rec, based on Christie's last comment. But what I want to know is there some expectation, or is there something that council wishes staff to do?
Well, if I may, I think council can all agree on the short term that we have to keep doing things the way they were, right? For at least, right, the short term being one season. Can we all agree on that? I think, and I'm assuming in the next year, Christie's probably gonna undertake this, as she just said. I think this is gonna come up in conversation. We have to be ready, the staff has to be ready to have that conversation on what priority use means and when. I think staff could work on, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think could work on the fact that we're codifying that priority use throughout the end of the lease, if we will, if we feel like we need to codify it more on a different memo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that sound good? We got a consensus on that, a head nod? Yeah. Enough direction, Adam? Is it muddy enough?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So short term, we're guidance is CRPR for this season, continue what you've been doing. And working with CRPR and what their endeavors are and what they want to do here. We'll work with them on what define that priority means, and us, staff, probably more so being ready to codify that priority use through the end of the lease agreement with the school district.
So my interpretation is, once we have a definition or a matrix
Yeah.
of what priority use is, we need to work to codify that.
Yeah, I think that's probably.
Okay.
And is the lease with the school district with College Township?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe as early on as we can get a feeling from them, so that we can start working on the new parameters or
Yeah.
and if you can, a phone call, say, hey, is there any reason we don't think this would be renewed?
Yeah.
Then we can start now.
That could be a different conversation.
Yeah, because if the answer is it's not,
Right.
then we,
Understood.
as a region, we have a big issue.
I got it.
All right. Okay, moving on, OB2, Shiloh Road rezoning. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah. 5 minutes? Yeah, we can take 5 minutes. We'll recess for 5 minutes.
I'm just kidding.
I cleared the room out.
I'll fill him in.
So I'm kind of glad we didn't get to page 2 of Adam's memo, or page 3. That would have been another hour. Since we're offline, those dead trees I talked about. But if the dead branches are hanging over the right of way, all in it. Yeah, then we can have them all. You can't make people go down. It just seems like, I know there's some absentee landlords along there. It's not how to escape lot. Some turn the grass and keep the.
Oh, I'm good.
I have 2 protein bars. Each person can have a half a protein.
Force them, this is how we'll
Yeah,
roll
thanks,
out on
guys.
Saturday.
That's one of those
You got
ones that's
Saturday,
not
I got
taking
Sunday.
yours, but it's just hard.
You know
Why
what,
can't we
that-
all just go?
That's,
Those guys were
I call
having
that
so hard.
that way, if that grass is perfect, no opportunity, just like force them.
House, Mr. Chair. That's why I left your
We
brief
did
up
some
to
favors
Chair.
in the subdivision when he came.
Guys ready? CNET back on, staff. All right, we will adjourn. All right, we are back and we're at OB2, Shiloh Road rezoning.
Thank you. Tonight, I'm here to report to council that on Tuesday, August 15th, the Planning Commission had an intensive meeting regarding the zoning changes in the planned research and business park zoning district. Mike Bloom took the reins, as well as support from Don and Mike, as I was on vacation this week, but Mike and the team were successful in obtaining a recommendation from the Planning Commission through the process, which involved a 12-page worksheet with may and shall statements. So as a result, we have provided the council with the outcome of the PC meeting. Tonight, Mike's not available to discuss, so I'm going to attempt to relay what the Planning Commission has said. But we think the best way to manage this meeting is by looking at OB2E, which was provided with you under the supplemental information. As you can see, the Planning Commission's recommendation is to include duplexes, townhouses, and multifamily residential uses by right in the PRBD with the stated conditions that are outlined in this memo. The recommendation met 2 of the tasks that council tasked the Planning Commission with, including applying the PRD regulations to any zoning change consistent with the consistency with the MPC and the vision of the Dale Summit Area Plan. So those were the 2 tasks they met in the remand. The last task they did not meet was allowing these uses by conditional use. As I stated, they are recommending these be permitted by right. So tonight, council should work to determine if the Planning Commission's recommendation is adequate, having the use by right, or if council would like to see the more deliberative process of a conditional use. But regardless of the use by right or conditional use, all of the shall may statements that the Planning Commission discussed the other night will still apply, whether it's conditional or by right. And the more shalls kind of get us a little bit closer to a more form-based code, so lightening those up to mays, just kind of as your discretion on how you want to go with this interim step toward a different zoning type in Dale Summit. So I'm prepared to review this in detail, Mr. Chair, if you like, or at a 30,000-foot view. So I'll just
Okay.
look for your guidance and how you want to move forward here.
I want to ask the council, so let's keep it at a 30,000-foot view right now. And simply what I want, I think, we have it as a discussion item. And I just want to get everybody's feelings. If you have any major concerns with what PC has said, and we can also let Bob talk beforehand, but I just want to put this out. If you have major concerns with how the rewrite of the ordinance goes, then we can bring it down into detail. If you don't, we can leave it at a 30,000-foot level, and we could even move to set the public hearing. So that's just considerations. Let's go ahead, though. We'll let Bob just speak to any points.
Well, the
he
only
wants
thing
to.
I can offer is a kind of an overview. It was a good session. I think I've been on the planning commission now for a number of years, and I have to say that I personally feel, and I think other members of council, planning commission felt, it was one of the best interactive sessions we've had with staff ever. It was well-organized. Staff, Mike Bloom and staff put together a wonderful kind of a template that we used to go through the meeting, although it was a long meeting, mainly because of the supplemental conditions. We had to go through 22 of those, and most of the time, I would say almost maybe 75% of the time, we agreed with staff's recommendation. It would either be may or shall. There were cases where we felt we disagreed with staff, and we put and the important thing was that we put down the reasons why. So I believe that that is in their packet. I think Mike was trying to record those. So that's important to look at those. There were two of them that we just said had to be rewritten because they just were not worth too much discussion. There was too much disagreement, building heights and so forth. I would say that our idea, our whole goal, was that by using use by right, we can condense it into more of a simplified document for developers, staff, and so forth, to analyze the proposal. That being said, by having supplemental conditions, which pretty specifically say what's going on, what they can do and what they can't do, or what they may do, gives the developers right off the bat, without going back and forth on documents, what's allowed. And the ones that are may go back to then staff working with the developer to come up with some agreement as to what might be. We do know that, or we are thinking as a group that the form base is going to be difficult in this condition with private ownership and so forth to accomplish. It's going to probably be a hybrid. But that's okay. That will evolve as the process continues. So we're not here to argue one methodology or another. So our recommendation is rather than, and I'm a little bit confused here because I thought conditional use gave the whole kind of negotiation period by staff. And what we were saying is, to then repeat myself, is that when we have supplemental conditions and use by right supplemental conditions, that pretty much gives developers a pretty clean diagram of what they can do and what they can't do in this particular zoning district.
Eric, you want to lead out? Questions for Bob or staff?
I like the idea of staying at the 30,000 foot level for now, because I think the first question in there is the big one, and that is the recommendation to go with allowed uses versus conditional use. Because when we got into this, we were thinking at the time that conditional use gave us the flexibility that we needed going into this unknown area that we are headed. The allowed uses, I completely and totally understand. If I was staff and I was a developer and I was a planning commission, that would be my goal, because it's cleaner, it's simpler, particularly for the developer, because they know going in, you know, they can make a call much easier. And we understood that too. But we wanted conditional use as that flexibility tool. So I guess I need to understand the move to allowed uses with the supplemental how close does that get us to where we wanted to be or thought we wanted to be as a council at the time? Does it give us, and I suspect no, but how much flexibility does it give us compared to what we really wanted in conditional, which is complicated, I understand. But it could also be a benefit to the developer if they understand the idea of the process of conditional use. So I'm willing to listen to that part, and I think if we can reach consensus, then it may be beneficial to walk through the shalls and mights, but for the most part, I think as a group, we should probably try to answer that question first. So I'm open to the rationale for why, why you explained it, why you prefer that, and I understand that. So I guess I'm more interested in what the other council members think about giving that up, giving up that conditional use flexibility, and staff.
I mean, I'm with you. I'd kind of like to tease out a little bit of how we arrived at that versus the conditional. Susan?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to echo what you said, Mr. Hoffman, that the worksheet was a great tool for working through this really complicated way of understanding different ways of approaching this. I think your point's really good, Eric. My question was, we did ask for something that looked more like conditional use. And my understanding or my thinking with conditional use is that accomplished two or three different objectives, that we were moving into a new way of zoning, and we would need to do that in a more open manner. Conditional use would allow for more public input. It would make it more complicated. So the point that you made about the cleaner way of doing this, which is through the work that you've done, which is the allowed use, that definitely creates that tool that makes it easier for staff and developers to work through the logistics of doing this. And that's consistent with what we said when we said we want to make sure we remain open for business during this transition. But my understanding of form-based code, or even some hybrid as we develop that, is that some of these allowed uses really limit what would in spirit be form-based code, and that was another concern that I had. So there were the primary objectives, looking at conditional use, and that I'm still keen to understand that better. I still think there's more utility to doing this with conditional use.
Anthony?
So I had to look back to see what the remand letter was. And so forth. But the one thing that came to my mind, I just kept thinking, Eric brought up a good point, and that was my, question. By having or allowed versus conditional, it limits us. And I just remember sitting here before when we would have a developer come in and we had a PRD, we welcomed that because we would be able to work with them. And that implies a conditional use. We could, they work with us, we work with them. And it goes hand in hand with that to make a better community or make a better development from where it's at. When you're restricting, and I understand, having been on planning commission as well, the allowed use, and understanding, just when a developer comes in, okay, they know they're allowed to do this. Well, they could go do that anywhere. The PRD was something that a developer can work with the township, again, to, have something better there. So I really thought it was just lost by by putting conditions as opposed to a conditional use, and having that come to the table and let's discuss. So that.
I have a comment to that.
Yes.
I believe that our rationale for this is that if you look, and we're not getting into the details of the 22 supplemental conditions, but if you look at them, they do address mixed use that can be applied to the whole district and not just this one area now that we're working with. There's all kinds of flexibility of multi-use in relationship to housing. It wasn't just the idea of housing and allowing all that in there. We wanted to do that, but I think that what we were trying to do was, again, by use by right and having these conditions, it doesn't really restrict, but it rather allows a good planning methodology that EPZ had given us and has been developed by staff of relationships between multi-use, which would be applied and applicable over the whole project area. That was our idea, and the idea was that when some of this is written down, May all of a sudden says, how do we work together with staff and council to get and there were quite a bit of mays. And we didn't initially like the mays, but then we thought as we worked as a group, it came out through our discussions that some of the mays are really allowing for a lot of flexibility. When you talk about street widths and some of the more engineering components of the 22, yeah, they're pretty strict. You shall make roads so big and so wide. But there was a lot of flexibility in what we thought we were proposing through supplemental conditions. Could there have been 24? I don't know. I thought we covered a broad range in the 22, and staff had recommended. No one came up with number 24 in our discussions. Could there be? Sure. But this is a dynamic, ongoing development, and it will grow and redefine itself as we go through this process of actual development. And getting plans, Anthony, and looking at them and going, you know. So I guess we're saying there is flexibility for developers, but there's also a set of serious guidelines to try to keep them in the direction of form-based. What he wants to accomplish.
Okay.
I hope I didn't make this as difficult as the last
Actually, you answered my question,
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
think,
ask, yeah.
is that this planning commission recognized what we were asking for in the conditional use and feels that the mays and the supplementals bring that flexibility back in a different way.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Okay, it's not identical, because you are providing use by right, so we have to nail it pretty good going in, because once it's a use by right, it's a use by right. And you don't have that conditional use process, buffer in between. So that still concerns me, but I understand now what the thinking was, is sort of more of a compromise. Am I characterizing this
It
correctly?
definitely, Erica, definitely was a compromise. And that, again, I'd like to say that at the last meeting, when we were here, we said, would it be possible to give us an example ordinance that reflected our thoughts about use by right? And staff did that. And they did it, I thought, quite well. And so there was an engagement of compromise between their thinking and our thinking. And I was very kind of happy that occurred. That's what I meant by the integration of working together, staff and the planning commission. And I also understand your point about the use by right. You got to nail it. Yeah. It's tough.
So would staff feel, does staff knowing what we wanted and what you heard at planning commission feel that's,
Do you want me to take a?
Well, you said they are different. They're not exactly the same.
Yeah,
And I
they're
mean,
not.
to nail it down and, taking away the by right takes away the process for the conditional use.
The public hearings, and
Right.
that very deliberate process.
Yeah, and the advertising and the notification to public, I mean, nothing says that we can't do that anyways, but, it's just a requirement in the conditional use. But the PRD is also included in this, which also builds into some flexibility that the council will have with the developer as well. So that's
And
kind of.
staff.
Yes, staff. So, I mean, that kind of is like the net, that can sort of.
Yeah, this is the layered approach, right? Okay, so the first layer is that, yep, we're going to, well, presuming it moves forward, yes, we're going to allow R3 uses within the research business park district. That's level one, right? That's high level. The second level says that you can do that, but it has to be done as a PRD. Yes. Planned residential development, so that's the second one. Then, in addition, there's the third layer is, okay, you can do R3 uses, you have to do it by PRD, but whether it is by conditional use or by the PRD, these are the conditions that are going to apply. Is that correct?
That's a
That's
good
perfect.
way to explain it. Yeah.
That was a good explanation.
Wow. Yeah. Award winning. Yeah.
It's cleared it up like that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
That's our,
That's what he does.
Okay, so let me ask council then, are we comfortable, because I think Eric laid it out very well, right, with that higher level and understanding the premise at that higher level, are we comfortable with that higher level? And do we want to dig in a little bit at this point? Susan?
Mindful of the time. I do want to dig in a little more because I think it's important to really consider what we're letting go of if we don't go with conditional use. I think that's important. I think the deliberative process, I think those are important. Those are messier and harder than having something like this, but I do think that particularly since this is a new endeavor out in the Dale Summit area, that is something I think we should discuss.
Okay. Eric?
Does that mean going through all the shells and maze tonight?
No,
Okay.
no, I already did that.
Yeah.
I already did that.
Yeah, may
I
I
have
offer?
one week of
No, I did that.
experience with that.
Yeah, I kind of just want to get a yes, yeah, we need to dig in more, because I'm thinking we might need to do something special.
I'm certainly open to exploring the idea that has been put forth by staff and PC as the alternative to the conditional use. I don't want to, they put a lot of time into it, obviously given it some thought. Apparently put some safeguards in there. I'm still a little nervous about use by right, because that's exactly what it means. Just want to make sure, so,
Yeah,
but open to it.
Anthony,
Ditto.
anything to add, Adam?
That means digging into the details.
Yep.
That means time, and you aren't going to be taking this evening, I presume, and
Yeah.
that's fine and understood. But it may beg your next point or question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, in review of the agenda in preparation for tonight, that perhaps this is something that we as council, especially since we are missing a council member who is very good at doing some of these things, right? We could probably agree. Maybe a special work session or something, digging into this. So just as something to float by there. I mean, would anybody have any huge disagreement to that, then we could probably get that scheduled, special meeting essentially.
Well, before we do that, I think it would be helpful for me in terms of the discussion. Eric, you started out your point with my question about conditional use, and you have more experience with this. So understanding that use by right does limit this, and some of those shalls, I don't want to go line by line tonight, but some of those shalls, I would think could have been mays if we go through with conditional use, and so we limit what we can do in the future with the developer, is that correct?
Well, once it becomes, and staff can help me here, once it's an allowed use, if they meet all the shalls, then it's in. With conditional use, we can, help me out here if I'm wrong, create our own shalls in order to
Right.
allow that to be a
Right,
use.
right.
Is that an oversimplification?
No, it was good.
So-
You can have reasonable conditions, and that's exactly.
And it also trips the threshold for public hearing,
Right,
whereas the other one doesn't.
right.
So we just have to make sure we have all our ducks in a row once they become allowed uses, use by right.
Yeah, and so my recommendation really, comes into, I think about it from my own perspective. I think if we went through a special meeting and really dug into it, it would kind of start to highlight that, and really start to see how that could play out, in actual application. And really, maybe really, start to, as a council, we could see how this, because me, in my head right now, I'm like, yeah, right, absolutely. Kind of like, well, this could happen, but I think if we really started going down through it, which we are not gonna do tonight, we could really see that, how it would play out, right? And
Yeah.
And it's, it's the interim change, so, but, one person on the planning commission said, yeah, it's an interim change, but once you change the zoning is changed for a
Right.
while. Although we do have some new code coming down, this is the first toe in the water
Right.
here. We have a lot more work to get done, so that's just something to consider as
So that
well.
was the one nay vote. I noticed that the vote was 5-1 or 6-1.
Yeah, the nay vote was just, the person does not want to see any changes to the PRBD. He felt that it
Okay,
was.
so it wasn't on that issue, it was
Okay.
just in general.
Yes.
General, okay.
Well, I think that.
yeah, Bob,
Coming
please.
away tonight with what I'm hearing, I don't think there's anything wrong with what we're doing here. I think that if I were sitting in your position, you do need more study.
Right.
I think I would recommend, though, looking at those 22 that were advanced by staff, and we thought we had pretty good staff support
Yeah.
in discussing that you may find the flexibility or the control that you have other than the public hearing or something of that nature. I would hope that staff, though, will work with us in supporting us, supporting both, and then trying to do the pluses and minuses for council. That, some of our suggestions are really not just, this is the way we started with conditional use, it's gonna have to be that way. I want to see some good, strong, from the planning commission perspective, some real strong rationale why our use by right is limiting staff and the community to achieve what we're trying to achieve at Dale Summit.
And some of those mays too with the conditional use can become those other reasonable conditions that you can tack on. So even if, some are shall statements, some are may statements, moving forward, if we do move forward as it stands now, those could be better defined conditions.
But I will report back, if they're not listening tonight, that there was a fair discussion about wanting to learn more about, and I understand. So I'll report that back.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just from my perspective, planning commission has given us very good stuff to chew on here, and really, I think done some good work. Yeah.
It's challenging, I think, for staff and us, because we're thrown into a situation where we're recommending a new methodology of zoning, we already had VPZ tell us, and so it's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Mark had something to say.
Mark, did you?
I was just going to keep in mind, from the way I look at this, Lindsay and I have had so many debates about this. I'm not a fan of conditional use, but it sounds to me like in this instance, and this is something completely new that has not been visited, zoning is black and white, and council can't waive zoning. That has to go through zoning hearing. My personal feeling on this is, if you want control and want to help shape this and be able to use ideas that are coming in, I really don't think you have much choice other than to go conditional use if you want that control and to mold it and shape it as it's coming along. I just wanted to kind of put that out and pass out that reminder with the zone.
Well, that's where we started.
Yeah, and again, we've debated many times. I do not like conditional use, but it sounds like what council wants, that would be the best way to provide that flexibility and that ability to negotiate and shape what your vision would be.
Yes.
I just want to add that I think it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about a modification to the existing plan research business park district. We're not at a point yet where we're implementing an ordinance change that will, in essence, impact all of the Dale Summit area. So as long as both groups understand that, I think that's a very important element here.
Well, I think it's good for the public to understand that too, Rick.
Right.
Yeah, just bring it back to, we're talking about one zoning district.
Exactly, yeah. Yep, and, you know, with these slight changes, any development that could potentially come in won't look exactly like all of the other developments that we have. So it's, you know, if it's just turning buildings a little or, you know, adding more blocks, it's a step into form-based, and it's, you know, won't stick out aesthetically like a sore thumb if we do make this change and then other developments do happen in the greater Dale Summit area outside of the PRBD.
Okay, a lot to consider.
I'm good.
Anthony? Good?
Yep.
Thanks, staff.
We will
Thanks, Bob.
endeavor to get a special meeting scheduled. We'll probably look at sometime within the next 2 weeks in advance of the next meeting.
Okay.
We have an extra week in between the next two meetings, so we have.
Well, there you go.
Great.
Yeah.
What? You're going to ruin our 3-week break?
Saturday.
Oh, yes,
We're
it's a
gonna-
3-week break.
We're gonna ruin our own 3-week break.
We only get 2 of those a year.
I know, I thought that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Lindsay.
All right, so we're on to new business. So we're going to new business 2, MB1 was struck. College Township compensation study.
Yes, last year, College Township reached an agreement to participate in the COG compensation study and their contract with HR Gov to evaluate and update our existing pay ranges. And the GovHR report was finalized in February. Since that time, staff has been working with the recommendations from GovHR and have put together a variety of tests and analysis to take a look at what their recommendations are versus where we're at presently with our salary ranges. And in essence, what GovHR has been able to do for us is to provide a real-world test of the validity of our wage ranges. And I'm pleased to say that while GovHR is making some recommendations for adjustments in our wage ranges, they are not overly burdensome in terms of the ultimate impact that it will have relative to the underlying College Township budget for personnel. So I am prepared to discuss with council or answer any questions that they may have relative to the GovHR study. The upshot here are listed here under the recommendations. There's no fundamental change from a functional standpoint to what we're doing right now. We're going to continue the type of banding that we now do, which is recommended but slightly different than what GovHR had identified. And the third recommendation is to adopt the manager recommended wage ranges that you have shown as an exhibit here as part of this packet. And which is really a recommendation to accept all of GovHR's wage range recommendations. And then the fourth recommendation here is to execute what will be both required adjustments and justified adjustments to employees' salary beginning with the first pay period of the fourth quarter in 2023. There is an additional item here that was not contemplated as part of the GovHR study, and that was the creation of a new position. And that new position is the Economic Development Coordinator position. That is something that is being recommended this evening to council to assist in the hiring of a future executive director for the College Township IDA. This is a position that will have as a primary responsibility the executive director duties for the IDA, but it will also incorporate a variety of other tasks that that position will fill for the township from time to time. So that is part of a recommendation along with a recommended pay range for that particular position. And I think the balance of what needs to be accomplished tonight is identified within the recommended motions.
Okay. Yeah, so council, we got two recommended motions. I know that we've discussed this in executive session, some of this, so I'll entertain a motion. You can do these separately. If you want separate discussion, you can lump them together. But I'll entertain a motion. If not, if you're not ready for a motion, we can go to questions and you can formulate a different motion from the recommendation.
I'll move to approve study-based manager recommended wage ranges as shown in Exhibit 1 and authorize staff to implement appropriate adjustments beginning with the first pay period of the fourth quarter in 2023.
A motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion is passed. So there's a second recommended motion for the Economic Development Coordinator. If someone wants to make that, we can do that, or we can have discussion now and ask any questions that need to be happening. Do we have any discussion now?
Was there an NB2C in the packet?
No, that was a typo.
That was what?
Typo.
Okay, because
It should be B.
Oh, sorry about that.
I'll make a motion. Move to create the position of Economic Development Coordinator with the salary range of $78,500 to $94,200.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Did we discuss this in executive session?
I think,
Yes, you did.
I wasn't present at that one, but
But
I
it
know
was
been
not at
discussed
the
before.
most
this.
recent executive
Yeah.
session.
It was not what?
It was not at the most recent
Yeah, it was a
executive
separate
session.
Okay, probably the one I wasn't at.
And
Okay.
I think we discussed it when we talked about the creation of
All right.
the position earlier on, so we've had a couple of.
Because I missed the
executive
one
sessions.
before that.
Yeah. I think-
Yeah, do you want to discuss it now? And just-
No, I'm fine if it was discussed and vetted and,
Okay.
Did somebody second that already?
Yes, Eric second.
Okay,
Susan made, Eric second.
thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, new business 3.
go going out with a bang.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh,
Well, at least people can still laugh.
Hey, there was a time when the chair was just, those were just coming out left and right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fingers.
We had a chair, Dave Fryer.
Oh, yeah.
Mark, you're up.
Once or twice a year, I'll pull a Dave Fryer.
Pun intended.
Okay, Mark, you're leading this
Okay.
one out, right?
Okay, and it's no secret to council, you've discussed at previous meetings some of the complaints about fireworks. Right around the July 4th, I actually started looking at our ordinance after we got the first complaint. Our ordinance was 20 years old, and with we've all seen the recent proliferation of a little bit of the good stuff fireworks that are now able and allowed to be purchased, sold, and used in Pennsylvania. Did some research into the Pennsylvania law that allowed that. Title III, Chapter 11, in the Department of Agriculture covers fireworks. Our ordinance as a whole was pretty good, but this enactment of the legislature from July of 2022 kind of blew up consumer fireworks. This defines, the act defines consumer fireworks, and it sets limitations on what a municipality can govern. The rules within this section for consumer fireworks are relatively strict, the hard and fast ones, and the only thing that we really, a municipality under this law has the ability to regulate outside of what's in here are several particular holidays that you may allow them to
That are excluded from regulation.
Yes. You can't limit certain holidays, and it does allow us to limit the time on any given night from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The only times allowed to use consumer fireworks, with the exception of the holidays that are listed. So what we propose to do is pull the exact definition of consumer fireworks out of the Pennsylvania state law, insert that in the definitions in the College Township ordinance, and then completely repeal our one paragraph consumer fire ordinance and insert what you see here that mirrors what the state allows us to regulate. So that's what we have to discuss, and according to our solicitor, because this is just getting into compliance with a law and a change of the law, this does not need to go to planning commission. You may direct it to them, or just schedule a public hearing unless you have some other questions or concerns about this.
Okay, thanks, Mark. All right, so, we can take action tonight that could set a public hearing, if we so desire. There's been changes to the ordinance. Questions for Mark, comments on the changes? Start out with Susan.
No comments, no questions. If it brings us into compliance with state law and the solicitor is fine, I think that's the best move.
Yeah, I have no comments or questions on how it's written. Eric?
No, if it's state law, do we have to have an ordinance? Or does the state just say, these are the limits that municipalities can put?
The one thing this does for us with the ordinance, it allows us to restrict, state law does not restrict the time. It does give us the authority that we can restrict the hours between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m.
Any
as
days
non-used,
besides this holiday.
with the exception of those
So we're
holidays.
taking maximum advantage of what the state law allows us to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And our previous ordinance had that time limit anyhow, right? Something along those lines?
It did have a time limit.
Our existing ordinance, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have those dates, exceptional dates.
Those are from
Yeah,
the state.
you've added in what the state statute
Right.
has.
Yes,
State law.
this mirrors what the state has put out.
Anthony?
I'm okay with it. I just had a question more about, out of curiosity, and I don't know if it changes anything, but does it tie into the noise ordinance, that timeframe?
That would be a judgment call from the police side. I mean, could it violate the noise ordinance? They could overlap, and then you go into the reasonableness and things of that sort.
The reality is that the noise ordinance is not enforced as a noise ordinance. It is actually, if a citation is written for noise anymore, it is written as.
It's under the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, under the disorderly conduct.
So it's.
So that's, I
Yes.
understand.
But
Okay, no,
Anthony,
that's-
is your question on, is the noise ordinance and this have the same time frame?
That, but he also answered it tied in to what, so if they're getting a citation for this, it's not necessarily like, we'll say a criminal act, if you will.
What, we do have time frame on the noise ordinance, right?
Well, that time frame is particularly, really centers around construction time,
Yeah.
start and finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, at one time, and I believe it is still the case, we had a noise ordinance, we had decibel that had been identified. That essentially was impossible to enforce. While I don't know that we ever repealed that, what the shift was to the
Disorderly conduct statute.
disorderly conduct provision, so that rather than have to take an actual sound meter
Yes.
reading at the edge of a property, et cetera, that was the part of the ordinance that was exceptionally difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. So almost by default, those similar types of complaints ended up being enforced as the disorderly conduct.
Okay. Any further questions for staff?
No, let's set the public hearing then.
You may have public comment. You may.
Oh, we do? Do we? Do we have some?
Oh.
Okay.
Katrina.
She's
Waited all evening.
Katrina, you've been here all night.
No comment.
I know she's the one that came on.
I have one public comment, but not that one.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, wait for a motion.
Is there a date, suggested date in here somewhere for the public hearing? I didn't see that.
I think it just has to be advertised one time,
Right.
not more than 30, not less than
So
7.
it would be,
Like
it
any
would be,
time.
what's our next meeting?
The 7th of September.
That's it.
Okay.
September 7th?
We have a public hearing that day for the pedestrian master plan, or
Short-term rentals.
short-term rental, yeah.
September
Okay,
7th.
then I would move to authorize staff to set a public hearing at our next council meeting.
September 7th.
First, to advertise for the adoption, to set the public hearing and advertise for the adoption of ordinance O-23-8.
I'll second the motion.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're done with NB3, staff informatives. Anything you want to inform us on further tonight, staff?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, we do not have the assistant manager's report tonight.
However,
So Classic Cones has been operating without a permit? I've been buying ice cream from them as it goes down my street.
wait a minute.
Yeah, they did, but now they're in compliance, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Where are they, where's that?
because that was on a consent agenda.
Yeah, for their
Yes,
noise.
for their noise.
You on that.
Oh, but they didn't have a permit
No,
for the other thing?
no, that's when they came for the permit after they were discovered driving around selling ice cream without a permit. They had to get the permit, they had to get the noise exemption that was on the
That was what we
consent
gave
agenda.
them.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what-
Contributing to a criminal enterprise,
I was enabling the,
aiding and abetting.
Unwillingly.
I read that, I thought,
All right, council staff, other matters. Anything else?
Just
All
a
right.
reminder that Saturday night,
Oh, yes.
Is
Other matters.
the College Township right at the Spikes. Discounts available for members of College Township community, and hope to see you all there.
What time should we be there? Just
Gates
council
open at
members.
5:30, and the game starts at 6:35.
And I'm assuming we're having a table like we have in the
Nope,
past?
no
No?
tables this year.
No table, just fun?
Just fine.
Just fun.
Although assuming there are members of council that are present, someone will need to throw out the first pitch.
Well, that's the chair's responsibility. Has been in the past.
Better get my arm warmed up.
Bounce that ball to the catcher.
Been a while. We had Paul do it last time, didn't we?
We have video.
Well, I think
Good video.
yeah.
We got video.
So do I have an opportunity to bring something?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yes, ma'am,
I have to
please.
go to the
Yep.
speaker.
Yeah, it's other matters
Katrina.
time. Yes,
No, I-
please.
yeah.
First of all, I'd say that I think Anthony had this right. He started off with a coffee and then I think he went to Propel. So everybody else, I don't know. You've got steel canisters, what you're drinking. So I am a member of the township community, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to come in and talk about.
Just please state your
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Oh, my legal name is Catherine Danka. I go by Katrina. And I live on Puddingtown Road.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I'd like to suggest, I'm wondering if you could consider doing a speed study on Puddingtown Road from Hauserville to the Spring Creek Park entrance to see if we could lower the speed limit similarly to that that's on Hauserville Road. The driveways in that area, it's residential, and the driveways are particularly short. They're shorter than the actual area on Hauserville Road where the speed limit drops, and it makes it dangerous to pull out, makes it dangerous for the people driving the vehicles, the people on the road, and even pedestrians. So I was just wondering if we could do a speed study. And I realize that there are a lot of things that go into it past the speed study, but rather than a speed hump, I would love to see something that creates a visual effect for drivers to notice that they should slow down.
Okay.
They see that big wide open turn and some folks from the hill like to just turn it off, so.
Well, I'll turn to the staff. I mean, I think it's usually you guys that facilitate these things, right? As long as we get head nods from
Yeah, you want the
council.
speed study between,
Between Hauserville and the entrance to Spring Creek.
okay.
And in both directions, because believe it or not, people like hit the turn in either way and just floor it. One of my neighbors, she was backing out of her driveway. She has several little children. She had someone, and she was backing out, and someone was coming from the park to the stop sign, and she was nearly hit. She pulled back onto the road, and then the person ran right up to her bumper. One of my neighbors had somebody parked on the side of the road, and their side mirror was ripped off. The kids are worried about going and getting the mail from the mailboxes. You know, there are a variety of complaints from the local residents, and I do have some of those like in writing, and I have asked them to email in. So it's just an idea. The road does slow down on Hauserville Road, so why not, implement that in Puddingtown Road, where we have such a short distance on our driveways to the road. An excellent example is your Lamont project. Like, people really slow down through there, and it's beautiful. It's nice. So, like, I can.
Whoa!
Mark that.
I can envision.
Don, how much money did you
heard
get
it.
her to say that?
Dawn doesn't get many.
So I could envision something that's nice and makes that part of like the community there, right? It's a little hamlet.
I guess we would get our speed signs out and just see what kind of data we're picking up on.
Yeah,
All right.
and that's all I asked thus far, right?
Can you spell your last name before?
D''A''N''C''A.
Wow, I had it totally wrong. Yeah.
Great, that's it?
Thank you,
No
ma'am.
soccer field?
Oh, we can if you want.
Go ahead, Katrina.
I don't want to tell you what I thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you. Okay. We're at that time.
Wow.
Motion to adjourn?
We're adjourned.
Nice.
Pike Street is nice.